In the 21st year of the Cesario calendar, a horrific disaster struck the kingdom of Granville. The scene was chaotic and blood-soaked, and the survivors began to lose their composure. Everyone's faces were filled with panic and fear. Outside, monsters had surrounded the last human fortress. Where the remaining survivors had gathered, the soldiers set aside reality and rallied with a faint glimmer of hope. But the most terrifying thing had yet to appear. A cry accompanied by harsh wing beats drew everyone's attention. Before them, countless gigantic monsters bearing an overwhelming aura were flying in. Then, a massive creature slowly condensed magic in its mouth, and then it launched straight toward the people below. That attack was enough to wipe everything out, including the fortress's sturdy gate, which it crushed to splinters. The monsters outside seized the chance and poured in like a storm, weapons raised, threatening the safety of those inside. Their lives were taken more easily than anyone else's. Those enormous beasts gradually squeezed the tiny lives out of people. An unavoidable fate was descending before our eyes. They crept into every nook and cranny of the fortress, causing soldiers to flee in panic. Everywhere lay the corpses of soldiers who had fallen to the monsters. Yet the creatures kept hunting humans until humanity's annihilation. Amid the smoke and flames, an anxious, urgent voice rang out. Nearby lay soldiers who had been fortunate enough to be rescued in time, all badly wounded, and the uninjured took turns tending to them. A soldier with a sallow face was being treated, and the other person's hurried voice rang out. That person was Will. He looked at everyone and shouted, "I'll heal him. Bring the wounded here quickly." Another man was brought over. Will knelt quickly and cast a healing spell to treat him. Will kept urging before it's too late. A subordinate nearby objected, "Lord Will, the gate is about to be breached. Please flee." He grew anxious seeing the danger close. "It's too dangerous for a top healer like you to be on the front line." Those words angered Will. He turned and snapped at him, "Are you telling me to abandon them?" He ground his teeth, fully aware of the responsibility on his shoulders. As long as he kept healing, he would not let humanity be destroyed. At that moment, Will recalled his parents' admonitions, their words about his duty to the world and the power he possessed. "The lives of everyone in this world rely on you. From now on, you are the greatest healer in the world." Suddenly, an urgent call snapped him out of his thoughts. "Lord Will." At the gate, two people were looking for him. One of them shouted loudly, "Where is Lord Will?" He followed the call and saw a dignified general whose arm had been severed, his breath weakening. Will couldn't help exclaiming, "General." But he quickly said, "Set him down here." As soon as the man was laid down, a soldier urgently asked Will with worry in his voice, "Can you save the general?" "Without him, this front will." Faced with the question, Will answered firmly and quickly, "I will save him," then crouched and began casting magic. Those around were anxious and the tension thickened the air, but he spoke with certainty, "Because that's why I'm here." Will swiftly condensed magic around himself and the general, and a blue magic circle appeared beneath them. Then with a burst, a column of blue light erupted, astonishing everyone present. That energy enveloped the general's severed arm, restoring it back to him. The elbow joints, fingers, and even the bitten-away flesh gradually healed. After the arm was fully restored, the blue light slowly faded away. The general slowly opened his eyes and regained consciousness. He sat up with his arm completely healed, and the soldiers nearby kept shouting in celebration, "Truly deserving of Lord Will, the general has woken up." He stared in bewilderment at his once severed arm, which now bore not a single wound. Will smiled with relief and said, "No matter how badly wounded, I will heal them all. Now humanity's victory surely lies before us." The general did not answer but only stared at his hand. His pupils twitched. Suddenly he swung a punch straight at Will's face. Will couldn't dodge in time and took the blow. He clenched his arm so hard it went white, his voice irritated, "You just did something useless." The soldiers there and Will were stunned and didn't understand the situation. After taking the punch, Will held his face and looked at him. Why did you hit me?" A bold soldier shouted, "General, what the hell are you doing?" But he seemed even angrier. He barked loudly, "Shut your mouth." His hand deftly drew the sword at his side. Will froze when he saw that move. The general plunged the sword hard into Will's shoulder, making him cry out in pain. The man's frantic demeanor and words terrified him. A murderous light flashed in his eyes. "This arm, why didn't you let me die?" The general pressed the sword into his shoulder, making him tremble with pain. He shouted, his voice full of fear and despair, "People like you who only stand behind to restore life. What do you know of our pain, our despair facing those monsters?" He glared fiercely at Will, grinding his teeth. "Just when I thought it was finally over, you revived me. How many more arms must we lose?" As he spoke, he pointed toward the soldiers, his voice laced with blame and exhaustion. Everyone here shared that feeling. They did not want to keep fighting. Only then did Will look toward the soldiers, his eyes widening in astonishment. Around him were nothing but wounded soldiers, nowhere left uninjured, some with broken arms, others blind, and others lying sprawled from exhaustion and pain. Will's face showed obvious bewilderment as he couldn't help but consider the general's words. "Impossible, I've saved as many people as I could. Does he mean everything I've done was meaningless?" A painful truth slapped him in the face, making physical pain seem insignificant. When he realized the general's words were true, so much sweat, effort, and tears, even coming all the way to the front lines, everything. Only then did the general pull the sword out of Will's shoulder, making him grit his teeth in pain. He told him, "Even if you're the greatest healer in the world, I don't care. I've endured enough for you." He turned his back to leave, leaving only the remark, "Humanity will be doomed anyway. If you want to fight, go do it yourself." Will called after him in a flurry, but he seemed to shout, "How can a healer use offensive magic?" His voice cracked with fear. "Without you here, this place would." But the general no longer cared for humanity's fate. He simply turned and walked away. At the same time, the dragon outside let out a terrifying roar. a fireball forming in its mouth. Then with a sudden blast, it struck the fortress directly, destroying almost everything. The room where Will was torn apart, walls collapsed, dust billowing everywhere. The general was pinned under a boulder, barely breathing. He tried to rasp out and run, but then another heavy weight crashed down on him, making him scream in agony. Finally, everything exploded. Will opened his eyes and tried to look around. Only then did he realize what had happened. The dragon that had just landed right in front of him, beating its wings and snarling ferociously. Will clearly saw the creature before him and belatedly recognized it. So this was the kind of monster those he had saved had faced. He forced a bitter laugh, his eyes full of despair. All along he'd only watched from behind. Will gripped the wound on his shoulder with his hand, which trembled uncontrollably. Damn it, all the effort learning healing magic was for nothing. Memories surged back into his mind, leaving him disoriented. Even with a natural talent for healing magic, even honored as the greatest healer in the world, he gritted his teeth as anger and helplessness welled up. He should have fought with his own hands. In that moment, Will picked up a nearby rock. Knowing he couldn't win, he still charged forward. Regret filled him inwardly, if only he could go back to that day. Will rushed at the beast, clutching the small stone with a determined face, sure that he would. But there was no miracle. The dragon advanced on Will. All that remained were the words "if only," and his life was swallowed by it. Those wandering thoughts drifted away, mingling with his tangled emotions. Suddenly, Will opened his eyes again. He sprang upright at once. His eyes scanned the surroundings, and the familiar scene struck him dumb. This is. He turned his gaze to the table beside him and saw the enrollment notice. If this is here, it means. Will could hardly believe his eyes. He rushed outside, and before him was a peaceful scene. People were chatting cheerfully. Could this be the day 5 years ago? He stood frozen, stunned, and rigid, his face blank. He seemed to have returned to the 16th year of the Cesario calendar. The day when Will, who would later become the world's greatest healer, looked around in confusion. He should have died by a dragon. An academy specializing in healing magic. Yet 1 week before starting at the healing academy, this was the day he held the enrollment letter in his hand. He murmured tiredly that he didn't really know what had happened. The last fragments of memories from his previous life rose like reminders. If his dying wish had been granted, then he knew exactly what he needed to do. He clenched the enrollment notice, his face set with determination. In a resolute voice, he vowed he would enroll at the offensive magic academy, Schwarz Academy. Will stood motionless, thinking in a world where healers cannot use offensive magic, an obvious fact any mage knows, he must break that prejudice. There would surely be many barriers to overcome. At that moment, memories from before returned to his mind once more. But I still have memories of my previous life along with the supreme healing magics I had mastered then. If I can fully utilize them, I can definitely change the future. With determination and resolve, he quickly set a goal for himself, his eyes flashing with certainty. By my own strength, I will save this world. To start the plan, the first thing Will thought of was school. First, I must enroll at Schwarz Academy, the world's top academy for offensive magic. There is so much about Schwarz Academy. Schwarz's superior training program is said to turn anyone into a true battle mage, and the person I met in my previous life also came from Schwarz. But then he realized their methods are top secret. You can only learn them once inside. Will's biggest worry was his identity as a healer. He closed his eyes and thought, there has never been a precedent of a healer enrolling. What am I to do now? Then suddenly he thought of a scheme. Money. Schwarz can turn anyone into a first-class offensive mage, and rumor has it nobles sometimes pay to get their untalented children in. But that idea was immediately dashed. He had just been reborn. Where would he get such money? He looked around the room regretfully. If only I had brought money from my last life. Even facing humanity's extinction, money would be useless, though the rewards I earned working for the kingdom would have lasted a lifetime. Realizing he was at an impasse made him more anxious. Even if he went to work now, he wouldn't make enrollment in time, think. Suddenly a gentle voice called to him, Will, are you awake? A beautiful girl entered and smiled at him, startling him, sister. Tears welled in his eyes as he unconsciously stared at her a moment longer. That's right, I've returned to the past, and at this time she is still alive. Seeing him like that, she asked in surprise, what's wrong, do you have a stomachache? Will flusteredly waved his hand and hurriedly explained, no, I just got a little dust in my eye, good morning, sister. She smiled sweetly and replied, good morning. He looked at her for quite a while. A new thought began to form. In this life I will surely prevent the tragedy that befell her. With my healing magic I can save people I couldn't save before. Suddenly he cried out, that's it. Will was so excited he grinned ear to ear, taking her hand and smiling foolishly. Thank you, because of you I found a solution. Her reaction was bewilderment. What is it, you? But Will didn't explain. He dashed off, leaving only, I'm going out for a bit, I'll tell you when I get back. She sighed helplessly, oh my, remember to come home for dinner. The Academy Alliance of Magic. An organization that supervises the kingdom's magic academies and makes all decisions related to magical education. At this time, the Alliance's chairman was concurrently serving as principal of Schwarz Academy. However, at some point the chairman stopped appearing at the Alliance because scene shifts to a vast manor. Moonlight spilled in. Ulnuram sat beside Marie's bed. Her face was flushed from a fever. He reached out and touched Marie's uncomfortable face. His eyes held worry and tenderness. Marie, he is the chairman of the Academy Alliance of Magic and principal of Schwarz Academy, Ulnuram Goldgren. Ulnuram's expression grew sorrowful and bitter. I'm sorry the healer today doesn't have sufficient skill, but I will find someone who can cure you, so please endure a little longer. At that time, the chairman always had to stay by his sick granddaughter's side. Yet the healing magic of that era could not cure her. He sat by Marie's bed weeping, and then the little girl passed away. But that's a matter of my previous life. Leave it to me. Will jumped onto the windowsill and called out, I'll handle it. The man eyed the unfamiliar youth with suspicion. You are. Ulnuram then recognized him. If I'm not mistaken, you're Will, the scholarship student from the Healing Academy, right? You jumped through the window, so you know of me. He raised his hand and began to explain. Your talent in healing magic is already famous throughout the Academy Alliance of Magic. I didn't expect you'd be the sort to climb through a window to get in. He scratched his head awkwardly at that, thinking to himself that his former self would never have done this. Maybe dying once made him bolder. Will got straight to the point. There's no more time for her or for me. He reached toward Marie confidently. I can cure her. Ulnuram regarded him with doubt and caution. What are you scheming? He stretched out his hand anxiously. Leave that for later. First, please allow me to treat her. The illness has progressed more than I thought. His eyes were full of worry and determination as he met Ulnuram's scrutinizing gaze. Ulnuram agreed aloud, which made him breathe a sigh of relief. Very well, let's see what you can do. The two of them sat facing each other by Marie's bed. Will's face was a little tense as he looked across at her. Ulnuram watched him with extreme scrutiny, a terrifying gaze as if he were ready to send him off at any mistake. Truly the demeanor of a principal of a combat magic academy. Will took a deep breath to regain his composure. He slowly took Marie's hand very carefully. A stream of healing light spread out and filled the entire room. Will focused on casting the spell, thinking that his mana had decreased since returning, but he still remembered the healing formulas clearly. Seeing Marie's condition gradually improve, the treatment formula for Zora's disease for this child wouldn't be invented for another 2 years. But with his current ability, she slowly and gradually opened her eyes. Will let out a long, relieved breath. Thank goodness. He broke into a radiant smile. You're going to be fine. Seeing his handsome face, she blushed unconsciously, but your strength is still weak, so keep resting. She turned away shyly and replied, yes, sir. Ulnuram asked anxiously, Marie, are you really feeling all right? Marie smiled happily and answered, yes, sir. I can't remember the last time I felt this well in years. His eyes glistened with tears as he looked at her with affection. He leaned over and stroked her head. I understand. Moonlight streamed through the window. What a relief. Scene change. Ulnuram sat in the parlor discussing. Thank you, Will. If there's anything I can do, I'll help however I can, he said without hesitation. Thank you very much. This isn't a request. He made his request. As you can see, my healing magic has reached a supreme level now. There's nothing more for me to learn in that field. He put his hand to his chest and answered clearly, therefore please allow me to enroll at Schwarz Academy. He looked slightly embarrassed and asked, you want to enter a combat magic academy instead of using your healing talent. Do you understand what that means? He replied with absolute determination, of course I understand. Ulnuram looked into the longing in Will's eyes, that gaze. He suddenly stood up, surprising Will. Perhaps my authority exists for this very day. Looking at Will's determined face, he said, I will make it a reality. The two stood and shook hands. I approve your admission. Will gripped his hand tightly, utterly resolute. Scene cuts to a room where a man mutters to himself, that old fox. I thought he'd just return quietly, but instead he pulls a stunt like this. He held up a paper, a healer claiming they can keep up with Schwarz's curriculum. That pampered type of healer. That paper was Will's enrollment letter. On opening day, scores of students stood in the schoolyard. On the platform stood Ulnuram with a solemn expression. At Schwarz Academy, a unique boarding school specializing in offensive magic, with a vast campus and countless training grounds, laboratories, and even a massive library, alumni wielded influence beyond the academy and received full support from the kingdom. There's no better environment to learn offensive magic. No healer had ever enrolled before, so surely countless difficulties awaited him, but studying here gave Will hope and he smiled, thinking he could become a battle mage too. The faces of friends and comrades, memories from his previous life appeared. And finally his own face right here. Now his life began a new chapter, his own destiny. After enrollment during class, Will's face contorted in pain, completely different from his earlier cheerfulness. The professor standing aside called, begin. He raised his hand toward the scarecrow. A magic circle appeared above his palm and flames welled up accordingly. Feeling the mana converge, Will shouted loudly, but no flame was launched as expected. Around his palm there was only smoke after smoke. Contrasting with the sneers from the other students, the professor calmly remarked, you failed again today. Then sternly issued a punishment. Until you can shatter that target with basic offensive magic, don't think you'll get into the class. Go practice on the training field behind the building. Heard that? Will protested loudly, sir, can't you teach me how to do it correctly? Like this I don't even know how to practice. The man pushed up his glasses and said coldly, teaching a healer is a waste of time. Even so, Will didn't give up and offered another idea. At least let me study theory in the library. The man maintained an indifferent attitude and replied, there are no books here for healers, defy that and you'll be punished. While the two argued, someone summoned a fire spell and grinned, but that guy hurled the flame at Will's back, watch where you're going. He fell forward onto the ground. He tried to push his trembling body up and asked, what the hell was that, only to receive the attacker's contempt. Couldn't even dodge that. Ulp smiled coldly and offered a lesson. This is an offensive magic academy. There's no place here for the weak who can't even protect themselves. He sneered with lowered head. In other words, getting hit was your own fault. Will was momentarily stunned. The professor sneered and added, Ulp said, that's right. Wouldn't it be better if you went off to the Healing Magic Academy? Seeing him agree, Alps grew even bolder. Go over there and have those gentle healers comfort you. Amid his jeering, Will fell silent and frowned in irritation. Late at night on the training field, Will sat on a bench and sighed listlessly. He looked up and mumbled to himself that there was no sign he'd be able to learn offensive magic. This situation didn't surprise Will much. He knew it would be difficult. The reason is that healing magic and offensive magic draw on different power sources. Magic transforms mana, the user's mental energy channeled through formulas to activate spells. And the nature of mana is determined by the caster's state of mind. Offensive magic uses active mana to produce fire or explosions, whereas healers only have passive mana and cannot use those techniques. But Schwarz has secrets to train top offensive mages from scratch, and among those methods there must be a way to cultivate active mana. I'm fairly confident in my mana control, so if I learned that technique I thought I could convert passive mana into active mana, but recalling the afternoon left him a bit helpless. He hadn't even been allowed into class. Do all the students and teachers look down on healers this much? Then he jumped up and exclaimed that he couldn't give up. The girl's silhouette appeared in his mind. She had said her mana was weak at first, but she trained it at Schwarz, so choosing Schwarz was definitely right. Will put his hand to his chin and hatched a plan. Blindly charging and won't help. I'm still barred from the library, maybe I should sneak in. Suddenly someone shouted, "Hey you, what are you doing here at this hour?" which startled him and he hurriedly said sorry. Will awkwardly rubbed his head and turned around. His eyes widened in astonishment. A breeze swept by and the sound of footsteps from shoes echoed in the quiet night. A pair of blue eyes peeked out from beneath white hair. At last her figure was revealed under the moonlight. He stood there dazed and called Veronica. Why did he know her? Because in his previous life he fought shoulder to shoulder with Veronica on the battlefield. She had been a top offensive mage, and in the end they parted ways in a painful farewell. Will felt secretly overjoyed to meet her again in this life. The nostalgia was real. Her spectral sword could cut anything in an instant. Just thinking that, he panicked and shouted because of the situation. Wait, she's drawing her sword. On hearing that, Veronica responded plainly that there was a suspicious student here, so of course she had to be on guard. She began to question him. What are you doing, trying to cause trouble or just practicing? In Will's mind, he judged that she wasn't like the bullies. He absolutely couldn't take a hit, so he hurriedly waved his hand and said, I'm just practicing. Only then did Veronica sheath her sword. Good then. The two exchanged words. You're Veronica, right? Yes, it's me, but she offered a reminder. Do you always address your teachers so casually? He reflexively apologized and only then realized. Sorry ma'am, actually, in my previous life she wasn't much older than me either. Seeing his puzzled expression, Veronica had to explain that she had skipped grades and become a teacher soon after, starting this year. Will scratched his cheek and said, I understand, while thinking inwardly that Veronica is so young. Given Professor Veronica's talent, that's understandable. Determination appeared in his eyes. This is his chance. Because Will wanted to ask her for help, she might teach him offensive magic. But he didn't know if this plan would succeed. He decisively voiced his request. I want to enroll in your class, Professor Veronica. What must I do to be allowed to join? Veronica placed a hand on her chest and politely declined. Sorry, but I haven't been assigned to teach any class yet. I keep skipping grades, so I rarely attend ordinary courses. This year I'm working as a teaching assistant to answer students' questions. They think students feel more comfortable asking someone their own age, but she added that she was puzzled that nobody ever came to ask her anything, which made Will awkwardly let it pass. He understood why they were too afraid to ask, probably worried she'd draw her sword at the slightest provocation. But this made it an even better opportunity. I can freely ask Veronica to teach me, thinking that boosted Will's motivation. May I ask then? Veronica accepted calmly. Sure, it's part of my job anyway. He asked seriously, I'll ask directly, what does a healer need to do to master offensive magic? She was silent as if considering the answer. Her eyes flashed sharply. I also sense something unusual in your mana flow. So you're the new student everyone's been talking about. Will was surprised that someone like Veronica knew. You know about me too. It's rare for a healer to study offensive magic. I haven't heard of a case like this before. He returned to the main point. I heard Schwarz Academy has a method to refine active mana from scratch if that method really exists. Then even I could use active mana. Veronica turned and delivered the good news. That method does exist and I can teach you. Will brightened. Really? Well then, however, Veronica had to explain more clearly. You still can't actually use offensive magic. You have too much passive mana in your body. At this level, even if you refine active mana, it will just dissolve into that mass of passive mana. Even if you re-refine active mana by other means, once mixed with passive mana, offensive spell formulas still won't function properly. He wouldn't accept that and asked further. Impossible, there's no way for a healer to use offensive magic. The answer was, as far as I know, no. Having that attractive option ruled out put him in a terrible mood. Damn it, my plan is ruined, but I can't give up here. If there's no way, I'll make one. Then he forced a calm smile and said goodbye. Thank you very much, I'll think about this on my own. As he turned to leave, she suddenly called out, wait, I'm not finished. It's true that healers can't use offensive magic, but there is a way for a healer to become an offensive mage. Will felt puzzled and asked outright, sorry, what do you mean? Veronica gave an example. This is an iron sword. If you swing it, you can cut down and defeat an enemy. Her hand brushed along the back of the chair. Then she suddenly offered another example. And this is a wooden chair, sit on it. Though not fully understanding, he replied, okay. Unexpectedly, Veronica lifted the chair easily. But even this chair, if you swing it and use it to strike, can knock someone down, making will shudder inwardly at the thought with that spindly arm of hers. As soon as she set the chair down, she continued teaching, you don't think to use something that way because it was made for a different purpose, but you have the freedom to use it however you want. The same goes for these hands. Veronica gently stroked his flushed face. I can pat your head softly like this. Her finger lightly traced his lip, and then snapped decisively at his forehead, or I could make you feel pain. Seeing Will react so strongly, she asked, sorry, did I go too far? He replied in agony, it's fine. To sum up, it's all about how you use it. Anything can become a weapon depending on how you employ it. Will seemed to realize something. Could it be using healing magic offensively? She nodded, pleased at how quickly he grasped it. A student asks and the teacher answers, how strange. Why didn't you think of that until I mentioned it? It's due to the nature of thought and innate differences in mana amounts. That's why offensive mages aren't keen on healing magic, and vice versa. But you might be different. YOUR Chinese letter enrollment in the Offensive Magic Academy already proves you're an exception. In fact, your mana isn't like that of a pure healer. He looked at his palm and pondered, not like it. He hadn't realized either, but could it be because I've reverted? She drew a sword and placed it at Will's throat. You need to reassess it. Veronica's words carried seriousness, a fierce longing to fight within him. If you can achieve that, your healing magic will surely crush any enemy. After an evening of teaching like that, time passed and the next day. Standing on the training field, he couldn't help but recall what Veronica had said the night before. Her way of using examples was truly unusual, but it felt enlightening. And why did Veronica have no prejudice against healers? It's strange that she has a doctrine linking healing and offensive magic, as if. Suddenly the professor called out that nickname, the healer, which made Will snort inwardly, they won't even use my name now. He looked at the roster and said, today's class will have one-on-one sparring. Since the class has an odd number, you'll participate as well. He could only listen helplessly. Your inability to use offensive magic is your problem. Whatever the outcome, it's on you. The corner of the professor's mouth twisted into a sinister smile. I've finished pairing everyone. Your match is against Ulps. Hearing that guy's delighted laugh, Will didn't bother to get angry. It's an obvious setup. A sharp glint flashed in his eyes, and he looked toward his opponent, Ulps Omen, rumored to be the scion of a prestigious noble family, always surrounded by disciples. From what I've seen in class, this guy has the skill of a true offensive mage, not just writing on his family name. Ulp sneered with contempt. Healing magic won't cure humiliation, right? After I beat you to pulp, you'll go home crying to your mother. Facing such cruel words, Will couldn't help but be angry. The corner of his mouth twitched, that attitude. If I were my past life self, I probably wouldn't care much. But I must admit this kind of person really gets under my skin. I also want to test Veronica's hypothesis from yesterday. I'll retaliate a bit, thinking that he raised his hand to call out, Professor, what is it? He assumed I wouldn't accept giving up. In a slightly amused tone, give up. No way, I only have a small proposal. Thinking to himself, I get it, I'm not inclined toward offensive magic, just as you said. Continuing like this is a waste of time, so if I lose this match, we'll announce something shocking. I'll quit Schwarz Academy. The professor showed no surprise. On the contrary, he praised the decision as wise. But I'm not finished. In return, if you win, I'll allow you to join the regular class. The cheerful mood he had vanished at once. Don't get delusional. Ulps laughed with obvious delight and agreed. Fine, a weakling wanting to fight the strong needs to cling to delusions to comfort himself when facing fear. This frail kid probably needs that. Besides, it's less fun if there's nothing to crush. With no other choice, the professor had to accept Will's proposal. Debating those fanciful theories is a waste of time, fine. He raised both hands and shouted to both, take your positions. Then he raised his hand to signal the match. Ulps exuded a surge of mana. When a magic circle appeared, several throwing daggers materialized alongside it. He was extremely proud of this technique. Look closely, this is my creation spell. Countless blades I conjured will pierce people through. Ulps shouted as he launched a dagger, one thrown away. If you can't even use basic offensive spells, what good are you? Facing the incoming danger, Will calmly pressed his fingertips together. A magic circle appeared between his hands. His eyes likewise took on a blue tint. Will calmly dodged the incoming daggers. Seeing his opponent evade so easily, Ulps couldn't believe it and blurted, what? The essence of my healing magic is manipulating life. I regulate a target's life functions properly, then heal by maximally activating their recovery potential. But recovery isn't the only thing I can manipulate. If I convert it into an offensive form. He thought Will dodged by luck and started acting arrogantly about it. Will didn't bother to argue. He silently adjusted his mana and reinforced his body. His hand caught a dagger that was flying close, then used magic to alter their trajectories. And one by one, the daggers fell to the ground from the applied forces. But one dagger remained in Will's hand, perfectly timed. The blade glittered in the sunlight. His expression was extremely confident now. Mind if I borrow this? The sudden reversal surprised everyone. What just happened? Is that offensive magic? I thought he only knew healing magic. Will corrected himself inwardly. It's not offensive magic, he's using healing magic to attack. It seems others can't tell the difference. The most upset person now was Ulps. He summoned more daggers, claiming he had held back earlier and could increase the number. No way would an offensive mage lose to some healer. He easily used the dagger to block the other incoming blades. The blades were completely shattered. Ulps grew more and more unhinged. It wasn't just about quantity. The blade now transformed into a gigantic sword, growing bigger and bigger. Seeing that, Will calmly assessed, he's strong. His innate understanding of magic is truly high. He even layered additional techniques onto it. Now he's adding a spinning motion. Ulps was supremely confident in this move. How do you like it with this technique? But Will simply raised his small saber and gently blocked the rotating tip of the giant sword. This scene was utterly unbelievable to him. Ulps ground his teeth, gnashing loudly. He poured all his mana into his sword with everything he had. Will thought to himself that he should probably reinforce his body's augmentation a bit more. No sooner had he thought that than he slashed, sending the giant sword flying straight up into the sky. The sword slammed into the ground as Ulps's resentful voice rang out, "Impossible." In the blink of an eye, Will appeared behind him and smiled, "I'll give you a proper treatment, so forgive me." The sword's tip flashed as sunlight struck it, but something suddenly blocked his view and someone shouted, "That's enough." Will quickly stepped back in a hurry. Ulps was so frightened he collapsed face first to the ground. A huge boulder had suddenly appeared in the training yard. The professor's voice trembled slightly, "And for the next match, both of you stop now." The two of them stared at each other like that. Then Will cheerfully reiterated the condition from earlier. "From now on I can join the regular classes, right?" He was indeed extremely annoyed and snorted coldly, "Do as you wish." Having achieved his goal, he spread a bright smile, "Thank you very much, Professor," and then left the class. "Excuse me, I'll be going first." Walking off in some direction, Will pondered the feeling from a moment ago. "This is my own style of offensive magic. It's far more effective than I thought. I've beaten a skilled offensive mage of my age group. Thanks to Professor Veronica, I can use healing magic to attack." In the end, my plan succeeded. The school's emblem flag fluttered in the wind. On the other side, Ulps tried to restrain his anger and said, "Professor, this was just an accident during class, it's nothing. Besides, I don't want every little thing reported to my father either." The professor had no further words. Ulps. A vicious gleam flashed in his eyes. "You understand what I'm saying, Professor?" He habitually pushed his glasses up. "Of course I understand." The corner of his mouth curled into a sinister smile. "We can't let a healer get cocky." In a classroom with quite a few students, Will felt a little nervous and thoughtful. Finally, I'm in the class. I'll learn everything about offensive magic. The moment the door opened, it drew a lot of students' attention. The person who entered was quite familiar. He glanced up briefly and then left immediately. The professor stepped onto the podium and began, "All right, we'll start the lesson on crafting magical tools. Since you're new, the content is still basic, and the homeroom teacher will cover multiple subjects at once. Today's lecture is on crafting magical tools again. There's a similar class at the Healing Magic Academy." He blinked for a moment and smiled inwardly. How nostalgic. As he spoke, he drew on the board so everyone would understand better. "Today we'll craft an ice bomb. The teacher will hand out materials. Follow the assembly steps and remember to infuse mana into them. In my previous life, I only made healing items like potions. An offensive magic academy really is different, it's all weapons. They probably expect me to actively pour mana in, but mana itself isn't crucial for crafting tools. Most functions depend on the components." Thinking that, Will opened his pouch, "So I can probably still learn this lesson." Inside were two items, a fragment of an ice golem's eye and powder from a fire branch. He opened the book to check their info. "Let's see, mix the fire branch powder with the ice golem eye fragment." Suddenly, the ice golem eye fragment emitted a strange mana aura, which immediately caught Will's attention. "This is..." Without hesitation, he snapped to his feet and used a technique to enhance his physical strength and fling the fragment away. An explosion occurred right in the classroom, and a massive block of ice formed on the wall. The earlier panic gradually subsided. The professor's shout rang out, "Hey you there, what on earth are you doing?" Will tried to calm down and explain, "No sir, it activated on its own before I could infuse mana." But of course the teacher wouldn't relent. "No excuses, I'll deduct points from you." Suddenly a sound came from behind him. When he turned, he saw Ulps's group sneering and laughing. It seemed they had sensed something strange was going on here. Then came the next class. On the table, a creature was confined in a cage. Mystical creatures class. A salamander. The creature and the students stared at each other. In the front row, only Will sat at a desk. The reason was that low scorers were pushed to the front. Focus on your studies. He couldn't help but stiffen at being so close to a salamander. It seemed to be trembling violently. The salamander suddenly spat fire at someone, but Will had anticipated it and held up a pan to shield himself. The puzzled professor asked why he brought a pan. Will replied confidently, "I thought it might come in handy." But when the teacher moved forward to confiscate it, as the caged creature inched closer, Will tried to tilt his back away, and inwardly he was certain. So that's how it is. They allowed me into the class, but had no intention of letting me study properly. Now what should I do? In the corner of the room, a student sat tensely. She looked quite worried as she glanced at him. After that, the harassment continued in the training yard. Ulp spat fire toward Will but claimed he had slipped. Next in class, the professor assigned, "Now solve this exercise." He hesitated and replied, "Sir, I haven't learned this section yet." The teacher used that to bully him. "If you can't keep up, it's your fault," points deducted. Even outside class, garbage was piled up in front of his door. The dorm manager heard and stepped in to punish him, saying he had a poor attitude in class. The punishment was dinner ban, which made Will complain that this was unfair. At the academy dorm in Will's room, he wearily lay down on the bed. "Everyone at the academy is hostile toward me. In just the first few days, I've run into so many obstacles, and there are mountains of challenges ahead." Will raised his hand in determination, thinking, "I'm still making progress step by step. I can't let this bullying crush my spirit." Images of that duel surfaced again, and besides, it was the first time I fought with my own hands and won. A hope always remained in his heart. I can become an offensive mage. After encouraging himself, Will sat up to study. Finally, I have a textbook. I'll review today's lesson a bit. The next day, the classroom was pitifully empty. Checking the clock again, he felt something odd. It was class time, but the teacher still hadn't shown up. In that strange situation, Will instinctively looked around. Apart from him, there was only that girl. It seemed they'd moved the class without bothering to tell us. With no other choice, he got up. There's no reason to stay here any longer. When he carefully struck up a conversation, the girl jumped in surprise. Will scratched his cheek and voiced his guess. Maybe the next lesson changed rooms. Erica glanced down and agreed. I thought so too. Her next remark caught his attention. Since it's just the two of us here and both teachers and others shun us, I can guess what happened. She gave off a gloomy vibe like fungus growing on her, so I guess I'm on your side too. Erica's tone was limp. We're both being sidelined, so let's be friends. Will was a bit surprised and silently appraised her. She looked gloomy but spoke with a sharp edge. Then he reached out and smiled brightly. Anyway, I'm glad to have a new friend. Nice to meet you, she exclaimed. How refreshing. She immediately stood and grabbed his hand. I'm looking forward to your help. Then it was the girl's turn to introduce herself. My name is Erica. Will scratched his head a little embarrassed. Erica is my first friend at the academy. Erica politely waved her hand and replied, that's understandable. Will, you hardly attend class and on top of that you're a healer. Everyone says that, healers are just weaklings. Hearing that made him freeze. She gave a wry laugh. Well, I attend all my classes and I'm an offensive mage and still I don't have a single friend. Will reflected on that remark, putting her personality aside. The prejudice against healers is deeply ingrained. Offensive mages who fight on the front lines and win glory often look down on healers. In my previous life, I was recognized early as the kingdom's healer, so I never had to taste this kind of discrimination. But at an academy specializing in offensive magic, that attitude is extreme. Studying here means I'll have to fight against that prejudice too. She hesitated a little. Finally, she asked, why did you come to Schwarz? Will mumbled the question back, you mean why? The answer had long been ready, so he said bluntly without hesitation. Because I was born a healer, I realized that's not a reason to give up. Erica tilted her head, not quite understanding. He could only force a smile and say vaguely, I have my own reasons too. What about you, Erica? Why are you here? Caught off guard, she answered awkwardly, well, I come from a minor noble family in a provincial area. But because the family had no son, my parents worried the lineage would die out. So they thought if I made a name for myself as an offensive mage, I could inherit as the family's matriarch. That reason isn't hard to understand. I see graduating from Schwarz would certainly help you achieve that. Erica said her woes sadly. The problem is I have almost no talent for offensive magic, and because of that I have no friends. Attending class is torture, it's just off. But then she clapped happily and added, but now I have a friend. Though she wore a bright smile, her words weren't cheerful at all. With Will here, who ranks even lower than me, I'm not worried anymore despite the low grades. Will scoffed, wondering why she said that so cheerfully. The two kept chatting amicably. If you don't understand something, feel free to ask me. Thanks, I know you mean well. As he turned, he smiled and said, but things probably won't be what you expect, Erica. An oblique remark like that left the naive girl puzzled. What do you mean? But Will didn't answer her question and said, come on, let's go find the classroom. The two stepped out of the room together. Wait for me. After searching for a while, they finally entered the correct room. Here it is, finally found it. As they entered the class, the professor immediately scolded them. You're late, class started ages ago. Amid the students' mockery, they both said, sorry, we didn't know the class changed rooms. But of course he wouldn't let that slide. No flimsy excuses accepted. Seeming to think of something, the professor's mouth twitched into a smirk. While we're at it, he pointed to the extremely complicated diagram on the board. Solve this problem. Seeing that, Erica felt indignant. This isn't fair, we just arrived. How could we know, especially since Will hasn't attended a single class yet? Will just stared at the board, expressionless. The professor added, if you solve it correctly, I'll excuse your lateness, but if you're wrong, you'll lose points. Ulp, sitting below, propped his chin on his hand and sneered. At this rate, he'll fail the course soon enough. Unexpectedly this time, he picked up the chalk. The scratch of chalk on the board echoed through the room. The lines appearing non-stop left her stunned. Others assumed he was just guessing wildly pointless. Finally, after a while, the chalk stopped. The magic circle he'd solved glowed with a faint light. Will's voice carried a smug tone as he asked, what's the matter, Professor? He couldn't believe it, pressing his face close to the board. The professor's eyes widened in astonishment. After checking for a while, he had to admit correct. Sit down. Ulps reacted the loudest. What? Once seated, Erica was genuinely curious. She looked at the boy wearing the most self-satisfied grin. Will, how did you solve it? After class, during the break, she scooted closer and called Will. Her long-held curiosity was finally relieved. Hey, how did you solve that problem? Will recalled the earlier moment and answered how I solved it. Though it looks complicated, I actually applied the example from the textbook. I read ahead in the textbook myself. Hearing that, Erica's eyes widened and she shouted, what? She slammed her hand on the desk, incredulous as she asked again, you actually read the textbook yourself? Seeing her strong reaction made him instinctively flinch a bit. Well, yeah, it's pretty simple. I only read it for the first time yesterday, but Schwarz's curriculum really lives up to its reputation as the world's top offensive magic academy. The material covers everything very effectively, systematizing topics from basic to advanced. If you master this, you'll easily surpass the level of a typical offensive mage. Still, without a magical talent, even reading it feels difficult. Back in my previous life, I was already good at studying, so that mindset plus the knowledge let me pick up offensive magic fairly quickly. After hearing that, a complicated feeling welled up in Erica. A healer who can do that, really. Wills, who are you, the greatest former healer in the world? While she trembled over that thought, Will was still nodding at his own diligent studying. Offensive magic textbooks are addictive, so I stayed up late to read ahead. Erica went pale. The content is terrifyingly difficult and should require a teacher to guide it. Will, I thought you were a trouble student. With that assumption, she clutched his sleeve and wailed, am I the class dunce? Am I going to be bullied? Oh, please don't leave me behind. He gently placed a hand on Erica's shoulder and reassured her, it's okay. I'll show you anything you don't understand. Will seemed to radiate a glittering aura, we're friends, right? Hearing that, her mood improved a lot. Will, thanks. Though he had just spoken sweetly, he thought darkly to himself. Of course I didn't come to this school to make friends, but with her help I can get a lot done. Will hesitated, then made a counter-proposal. Can you help me with something? After all, class isn't just theory. Erica, calming down a bit, remembered. The next session is basic offensive magic. Images of the training ground flashed back. Oh right, that subject I always fail, the reason I was kicked out of all those classes, she now thought. But you should be able to do it now, you even beat Ulps. He had to be honest, no I really can't yet. I still can't use basic offensive magic, hearing that she grew a little worried, so then. Will clenched his palm and said energetically, but I have a method. Shifting focus to the girl beside him, that's why I need your help. On the training field, the student stood neatly in line. While standing there, he recalled the basic knowledge he knew. Offensive magic has basic spells and individualized spells. Basic offensive spells are designed so anyone can use them by analyzing the formula. Memorize the formula and you can cast it. He pictured Ulps using magic as an example. The kind of spell only a specific person can use is called an individualized spell. Even Schwartz's curriculum separates basic offensive magic lessons from sessions to train each student's individualized spells. Since the latter has no standard answer, even I can participate by using healing magic to attack. Lost in thought, the homeroom professor suddenly stood right in front of Will. But as for the former, if you can't use basic offensive spells, you'll never pass the course. This time he looked quite confident. Theory might be fine, but practice is another matter. You'll fail this subject if you can't use basic offensive magic. Will didn't argue, he calmly replied, yes sir. The professor led him to the scarecrow target in the distance. The test is the same as always. Use the basic offensive spell Fireball to create a fireball and hit that target. He folded his arms, both mocking and warning. I'll repeat, this is the most basic of basics. If you can't do this, I can't let you advance in class or graduate. The professor's eyes narrowed, recalling that match. I'd seen you use healing magic in the spar before, and I've heard that the body moves more flexibly after being healed. But you can't even cast a basic offensive spell. As if reading his thoughts, Will curled his lips and said, useless types like you should get out of my class at once. That expression was noticed by the professor. Were you just smiling? A red-orange light reflected in his wide, astonished eyes. Because at that moment a flame appeared in his palm. What, how can you use magic? As everyone whispered about the incident, the one who caused the stir smiled inwardly. Good, they didn't notice. Backtracking to a moment earlier in class, his proposal had been that I asked Erica to produce a flame using a basic offensive spell, then transfer it into the salamander's tail. Somehow you ended up with the salamander's tail. The way the flame appeared was, I hid it in my hand while continuously healing so the tail wouldn't burn away. The two talked about this, but didn't you feel pain? I'm a healer. If I keep healing nonstop, this is nothing. Back in the present, right before casting, I used healing magic to trigger the tail's fire sac, so it looked like a fireball had just been created on the spot. Thinking that, will gently launch the flame toward the target. The red circle was completely charred by the fire. While the professor gaped in shock, he merely smiled calmly and asked, what's the matter, professor? Recalling the scene, the man quietly confirmed, it was fire, no doubt. That's a basic offensive spell. Did this kid really just use offensive magic? The professor folded his arms and feigned composure. You passed, step back. Will obediently nodded and replied, thank you very much, sir. In the crowd, the co-conspirator was as surprised as everyone else. And one person was grinding his teeth in fury that Will had successfully summoned the flame. In the classroom, Ulps shouted at the person in front of him. What the hell is going on? The professor propped his chin and asked confusedly. I'm trying to figure that out too. Why does that brat suddenly know how to use offensive magic? His attitude wasn't the usual mocking tone anymore. I'm not interested in that. Just remembering that irritating smile sent Ulps into a rage. How dare he defy me, and he's a healer to boot. Having him in the same class is unbearable. If I tell my father, he could disband this whole class. He said that and hurriedly collected himself. Wait a moment. He turned and left the matter to the other, then said, do whatever you need to, just make sure he's out of my sight. And so the unpleasant conversation ended, leaving the professor flustered and unsure what to do. If something outside class is discovered, the risks are high. This isn't like bullying some noble students. Do you know what I had to do to become a teacher at this academy? But I have to take the risk to protect this position. A healer acting high and mighty like that, who knows what other teachers will say? I won't let a 15-year-old healer ruin my life. This time he had to make a meticulous plan. There was no other choice. I have to handle this myself. At the training field after class, Will asked the man in front of him, puzzled, is something wrong, sir? Why did you call me out here? The professor didn't answer and instead sneered, you seem to be a bit overconfident these days. He laughed and rubbed his head in reply, thanks to you too, sir, earning the other's contempt. Idiot, I'm not praising you. He brought up past incidents and started acting arrogant. What about this? You've skipped quite a few of my classes since enrollment. How do you intend to make up for that? A bead of sweat rolled down Will's helpless face. I was going to ask whose fault that is. But then he obediently gave a conciliatory answer. I borrowed notes from a friend and studied on my own. It should be fine, sir. The professor dismissed that excuse in an irritating tone. That's not up to you to decide. Absences must be made up. The glasses were pushed up instinctively again. The supervising teacher will decide the makeup content. And the makeup will be a sparring match with me. Hearing that, Will was surprised. A match between teacher and student. The win condition sounded easy. Yes, of course I'll go easy on you given the disparity. Just land a hit on me and I'll pass you. With such a generous condition, you're not planning to run, are you? Unsurprisingly, he didn't answer immediately. Seeing his silence, the professor arrogantly thought, your attacks will never reach me. Let me beat you so you learn the gap in strength, then you'll know to obey. After a moment's thought, Will decided and replied, I understand, all right. At that, a vicious look crossed the professor's face. Perhaps as soon as he spoke, he formed a magic circle and said, then let's start right away. The large chunk of earth stuck in Will's memory. He'd seen the professor's magic once before. It was earth manipulation magic. The ground ahead trembled violently. Will quickly sprang back to dodge too fast. Suddenly, he noticed something within the rock. Immediately, another boulder jutted out, making evasion extremely difficult. Once again, when he looked up, Will gaped in astonishment. A massive stone column crashed down where he had just stood. The professor struck without hesitation and snorted, what's the matter, just dodging. Seizing a moment to catch his breath, Will assessed. Unlike an artificial construct spell, he was using the existing ground so the attack speed was extreme, and the attack trajectory was very flexible. He's definitely on a completely different level than Alps. His legs sprang up to jump again, but he was fairly confident in his speed. The evidence was that it still hadn't become too fast for him to dodge. In an instant, the distance between them closed. The magic circle beneath lit up once more. In the blink of an eye, two huge boulders appeared beside Will. Then they crushed together with no gap at all. The man who had made such a cruel move smiled. But things didn't go the professor's way. Will had a knife in his hand from midair. The hand holding the knife swung quickly backward. Unexpectedly, the professor's body was protected by stone. The blade couldn't move an inch further, it's solid. This wasn't going to do much. Will clicked his tongue and stepped back. Inside the rock, the professor sneered, pathetic. At that level, you couldn't break my earth-crystallized iron armor. In this situation, he couldn't help spitting out, flashy name, isn't it? This time he hurled cruel words. I've never heard of anyone using healing magic to attack. What a half-baked copycat. Claiming to be an offensive mage with such weak, sloppy magic is ridiculous. Will wasn't angry, he just sighed and said, Professor, thanks to healing magic, I've studied the human body very thoroughly, and I realized people normally restrain their own strength. Because the body can't withstand its full power, if you force an overlimit release, the body will shatter itself. The professor mocked in confusion. What is that, trying to lecture me? Since offensive magic doesn't work on you, you plan to run away with words. He raised a hand and laughed. Wait. He rolled up his sleeve to reveal some muscle. So even if you break your limits to unleash more power, this body still won't remain intact. A stream of mana flowed from Will's palm. But I'm a healer, so even if my hand breaks, it doesn't matter. He seemed to have realized something. As he spoke, he stepped closer. Of course I don't like pain, but it will heal right away. Though flustered, the professor still thought it foolish. How could that trick break my earth-crystallized iron armor? Will calmly said, just try me. A mad smile appeared on the calm boy's face. The man could only gape, unable to dodge in time. The punch swung hard down at the professor's firm face. The rock shattered, revealing his face covered in blood. He smiled calmly and warned, it's not good to arbitrarily decide a student's limits, you know. Will learned a new lesson. Since Professor Veronica suggested using healing magic to attack, he suddenly realized there's nothing more foolish than assuming something is impossible. I'm sure I'll become much stronger than this. Suddenly, he sensed something approaching. As he dodged to the side, a stone pillar shot forward. It seemed the earlier punch hadn't knocked the man out. The professor was now furious. Watching him struggle to stand and tremble, Will found it a bit amusing and reminded, hey, you said one hit and I'd pass. But the professor refused and snapped back, shut up. There's no witness here anyway. A magic circle appeared on the ground again to force me to admit I was struck by a healer. The earth rose into sharp rocky spikes. I will never accept that. In this situation, he only sighed in exasperation. Breaking limits isn't just about punching. Mana surged from the soles of his feet. Immediately, Will moved to stand right in front of his opponent. The man froze and gaped too fast. He could only watch as the opponent raised a fist again. The iron armor wouldn't have time. The professor couldn't dodge and shut his eyes tight, bracing for the blow. But he felt nothing after waiting a long time. He hesitantly opened his eyes and saw the punch stopped right in front of his face. What had stopped? Then he realized the strange situation. He couldn't move either. Just as he thought that, the punch hit his face again and the professor realized, no, is time slowing down? He couldn't form a word, only silently begged inside, please stop. The professor's face twisted in pain. This hurt relentlessly. How many times worse does this feel than a normal punch? It's still not over yet. I can't stand it, but I can't flee, nor can I scream to relieve the pain. In that moment, his pleas seemed to echo out, please end this. As if hearing the professor's inner voice, time immediately returned to normal. His whole body collapsed to the ground. The one who caused it wore a gentle smile. Glad you're back, Professor. For me, it was only a blink. Hearing that, the professor sat up and shouted, what is this? What did you do? Will waved his hand to explain. It's not like you think, Professor, I'll explain everything carefully. This is what happened. The moment the fist made contact, I cast a sensory-enhancing spell on you. Originally, this spell treats those with hearing or vision loss. Recently, I've used it to speed up my reflexes, but I cast it on you at a level beyond the limit. As a result, your senses became abnormally sharp, making 1 second feel like 1,000. How painful it is to be punched in that state. You're probably the one who understands best. Though smiling, he gave off an extremely terrifying aura. Also, I have one question. Did I pass the test? The professor clicked his tongue irritably. Fine, but Will wasn't finished. One more thing. His hand tightened on the other's shoulder. Perhaps you can't wash the discrimination that's in your blood, but if you dare block me again. An intense killing intent radiated from him. Then I'll make you taste pain so your body remembers it forever. The professor trembled in fear. I just want to study in peace. And of course I don't want other students bothering me. Then feigning nonchalance, Will spoke extremely politely. Will you grant my request, Professor? Time passed like that as the sunset light bathed the school. Walking down the corridor, he couldn't help thinking what the hell is wrong with that name. I always assumed healers lacked combat ability and were weak with no will to resist. Everyone says those people must obey our offensive mages. But he's completely different. Not only does he have formidable combat skill, his will is so strong it radiates killing intent. What a small world. Ulp showed up at just the right moment. He looked extremely pleased as he asked, Professor, has he finished the check? Then he snickered, thinking now he's even closer to being expelled. But suddenly the professor shouted an order, shut up. He shoved his face close and warned, don't touch him again. I'm saying this for your own good. If you think he's just a regular healer, you're terribly mistaken. Ulps of course didn't believe it. Frowning, he retorted, that's not something I want to hear. Did you forget if I tell my father? That familiar line no longer frightened the professor, so go ahead and do it. In his days, the professor continued, and come to think of it, if you really can do that, why not throw him out instead of targeting me? Before leaving, he dropped a hint. If the clan acts on your advice, there's a good chance he'll quietly come back later to bite us. The empty corridor now held only Ulps. His fist slammed hard into the nearby wall. A curse spat from his lips, damn it. The next day after class, the book was closed. Will stretched for comfort, so peaceful. He'd already guessed why things turned out this way. It seemed the professor had properly warned Ulps. He still shot Will hateful glares sometimes, but no longer dared act. Erica came over to ask about the homework while Will was thinking, which helped him focus on studying, but it still wasn't enough. That bloody scene reappeared. To change that doomed future for humanity, I need to be stronger. But outwardly, he calmly explained to her. The idea of using healing magic to enhance is good, but what I've been doing is simply punching with everything I've got. After he finished teaching, Erica left satisfied, leaving Will alone. Sensory enhancement is mainly for intimidation. Compared to the variety of offensive magic, I'm still far behind. I need to devise new combat methods. He carefully asked the person before him, that's what I'm thinking, what do you think? Once again, Veronica appeared and met Will, Professor Veronica. Veronica closed her eyes and spoke in a cold voice. I wanted to say something earlier, Will replied morosely, reluctantly, yes. She folded her arms and smiled in praise. Well done. Expecting to be scolded, he was surprised to hear her say he's been the talk among the faculty. A healer keeping pace with Schwarz's lessons is quite an achievement. Veronica then turned toward the teachers. Most of them seemed displeased about this. Will forced a helpless smile, yes. He asked doubtfully, did you hide that you gave me advice, Professor Veronica? Veronica answered immediately. Not exactly hiding, it's just that I don't usually talk with the other teachers. There simply wasn't an occasion to mention it. Will recalled silently the scene of her sitting alone in a corner. Was Professor Veronica isolated even among the faculty? He awkwardly scratched his head to smooth things over. I'm glad it's like that. It's all thanks to your advice, Professor. I'd feel bad if your position suffered because of this. Veronica spun around to leave. I don't care, so don't worry. Besides, I'm the one who should be grateful. Will asked suspiciously, you're grateful to me, Professor. She turned back to answer his question. As I said, with a healer's mindset, they never think to apply that theory in practice. Veronica slowly drew the sword strapped to her back. Veronica swung the sword with a serious expression. I've been curious what a healer fighting in real life would look like. Will began to feel flustered and panicked. Professor, what are you going to do? She raised the sword in an attacking stance. I want to test your current level. Didn't you want to know how to become stronger? He hurriedly waved his hands to refuse. Wait, facing Professor Veronica. Veronica cut him off. There's no room for pauses on the battlefield. She launched herself forward with a powerful jump. Will's face was a mix of terror and panic. He stood there helplessly, not knowing what to do. He raised his short glaive to parry Veronica's attack. Will gritted his teeth, using the short sword to try to hold her off. Veronica poured her strength into a heavy slash, but he quickly dodged the blade. Will clenched his teeth as he parried and thought inwardly. Even with reflex-speedening magic, I nearly couldn't keep up. He looked at her as she kept swinging the sword at him. At this rate, Professor Veronica wasn't just fast, each of her movements was honed to deliver continuous strikes. Will stepped back, breathing hard and exhausted. Relying only on physical enhancements to keep up would hit a limit sooner or later. He gathered himself and lunged at Veronica, revealing a single opportunity with a speed he'd never shown before. Will drove his rear foot into the ground, generating a massive force that dented the earth. He had to catch her off guard. Will unleashed his full speed and surged forward at her momentary lapse. In an instant, the sharp tip of his blade thrust straight toward Veronica's face. Gripping the sword tight, a wave of power radiated from the blade. Veronica tilted and brought her sword down in a powerful strike that stunned Will. His eyes narrowed, there was fear, admiration, and astonishment all at once. The tip of his short sword was cleaved off and clinked to the ground. Will stood dumbfounded, offering an awkward chuckle. Veronica quickly sheathed her sword at her hip. She propped her chin and said in wonder, "I didn't expect you'd force me to use a mana blade." Will looked at her helplessly. How can her face stay so composed? Veronica put a hand on her hip and remarked emotionally, "I thought your level was only that of a healer who could fight like an offensive mage. But in truth, your ability ranks among the top of your offensive magic peers." Will stammered in reply, "Thank you very much, but this still isn't enough." Veronica folded her arms, eyes full of expectation. "I like ambitious people like you. Just strengthening the body isn't satisfying enough, is it?" Will held up his broken sword and said, "Yes, no matter how much I push my body's limits, what I can do is still limited." Veronica countered with arms crossed, "A sword isn't only for slashing, you can stab or throw it. There must be other ways to apply healing magic besides physical enhancement." He scratched his head embarrassedly and answered, "I've thought of many ways, but none of them really work." She tapped her temple. "Perhaps you're lacking real combat experience. Every idea needs practical experience to take shape. Knowledge is important, but ideas born from practice are what you're looking for. Didn't you notice anything from the match just now?" Her words made Will recall, and indeed. He spoke timidly to ask, "So should I keep sparring with you, Professor Veronica?" Veronica replied, "That's not bad, but soon there will be a field training session to exterminate monsters." Will echoed in surprise, "Field training?" He thought inwardly, this happened in my previous life too, the joint monster extermination training of the 3 academies. The Offensive Magic Academy Schwarz Academy, the Healing Magic Academy Heilig Academy, the Swordsmanship Academy Silbern. Students from each school form teams and carry out real monster extermination tasks. Back at Heilig, I didn't participate but will remember the images of those monsters. This life I'll eliminate monsters and change that doomed future. He clenched his fist with firm determination. "I will for sure." Veronica stared at his posture for a while in silence. Her gaze deepened and she said, "If you want to join, you'll have to prove your ability through the Academy selection exam. I heard there's a first-year student this year who's been dubbed a prodigy. Your goal should be to claim the top spot among your classmates." Will asked curiously, "How does that field training selection exam work?" Veronica didn't hesitate and answered at once. "The candidates fight each other directly." She began describing it to him. "Every year about 100 people apply and only those who show real capability are selected." Will heard this and evaluated it internally. This school really is the type that only values combat. Will put his hand to his chin and fell into thought. "I remember at Heilig there were so few applicants that anyone who wanted to join could just get in. This proactive approach must be the Schwarz style." He recalled his past life memories. "Heilig, huh, how nostalgic. I wonder what my master is doing right now." Veronica spoke up to remind him, "By the way, rumor has it that the genius has already surpassed even the teachers. It won't be easy to take first place." Will was incredibly excited internally. Much better than that old homeroom teacher, huh? Will was extremely curious and asked, "Has the professor not met that student yet?" Veronica sighed with regret. "I heard that another teacher is already in charge of that student, so he never comes to see me to ask about anything." Will smiled awkwardly, feeling helpless, and thought to himself, "I don't think that's the only reason. None of the other students dare to ask you anything either." With a very determined look, she placed her hand on her chest. "Certainly, don't worry, I will also help you train." Will heard this and was overjoyed. "Thank you very much, Professor." Time quickly moved to the day of the selection exam. He was walking along the corridor of the arena, thinking to himself, in the blink of an eye, the exam day has arrived. His face showed clear determination and resolve. "I have prepared as best I can, now it's just time to fight." Suddenly from behind, a voice calling out made Will freeze. "Hey, Will." He turned suspiciously and called out, "Principal." Ulnuram flashed a bright smile and approached to greet him. "Long time no see, since then my granddaughter has been doing very well." He smiled and replied, "That is great to hear, sir." He stared fixedly at Will and said, "Even though you are the one who saved my granddaughter, I apologize for only caring about you until today. I know you've mentally prepared yourself, but at Schwarz it must be very tough, right?" Will placed his hand on his chest and answered with great confidence, "At first I struggled a bit, but now things are going well." He was incredibly excited and said, "I'm even aiming for the championship position in this selection exam." Ulnuram stroked his beard and laughed heartily. "That's reliable." Suddenly, a forceful voice approached from the opposite side. "How ridiculous, hearing that is an eyesore." He slowly walked toward the two of them. "Does this guy also think he can compete for first place? As the training supervisor, I have to teach you brats a lesson." He was the field training supervisor, Bode. Will turned back to stare fixedly at him, starting to evaluate. "I met him in my past life." He recalled his past life memories. Bode, the Purple Lightning, is an attack mage who made many glorious achievements during the Great War. While he was thinking, Bode approached and grabbed Will by the collar. Personally, he didn't have many fond memories of him. He radiated an overwhelming fiery aura. Combat is a world of natural talent. Training and effort are just things added on top. Bode was extremely angry, snarling in Will's face. Once a healer, you have no chance of winning. Facing the current situation, Ulnuram spoke up to mediate. The test is coming soon, let the results speak for themselves. Arguing won't solve anything. Bode heard this and dropped him, arguing this is my way of teaching. He turned his back with a very confident look. Furthermore, the opponent you have to face is my Sirius. A teenage figure who had been in the distance approached. That young man was Sirius Bluenote. Will's gaze stared fixedly at him, looking at the familiar figure from days past walking toward him. That was the genius Sirius Bluenote, the opponent he needed to defeat to take the lead. Two sets of determined eyes moved forward and stared fixedly at each other with resolve. Ulnuram stroked his beard and sighed in appreciation. That's passion, very good, but it's almost time. Come on, don't stand there stupidly, let's go. The candidates quickly lined up to enter the arena. The entire grandstand was full of explosive excitement. The candidates lined up neatly to listen to the commands. Will turned to the side and asked, Erica, are you participating too? Erica sobbed helplessly. If I don't participate, my pocket money will be cut off. The boys behind turned to look at him with sharp, glinting eyes. Will helplessly gave an awkward smile. I don't want to be here at all. Ulnuram stood in the middle of the students and gave a speech. I am very proud to see such a large number of candidates applying this year. Let your passion and will to fight burn brightly. He raised a finger and began to explain. The preliminary round is about to begin. After a specified amount of time, those who remain standing will proceed to the main round. Will was extremely tense and thought to himself, a survival match with hundreds of people here, isn't it too cramped? As if understanding his thoughts, Ulnuram struck his staff firmly on the ground. You must be worried that this place will be too cramped, but don't worry. A wave of magic was released, creating a spatial dimension beneath everyone's feet. Everyone looked down at their feet, completely stunned. What is this? Is that a starry sky beneath the ground? He raised his staff high into the sky. It shone brilliantly and a large magic formation appeared in the sky. Let's start. Will was teleported to a forest. He began to observe and look around. Is this the forest behind the academy? Suddenly, Ulnuram's voice rang out. Can everyone hear me clearly? I have just randomly teleported all of you. You can avoid strong opponents or cooperate with people you know. Erica was screaming in a panic. Where am I? Sirius had a surprised expression, listening carefully to his words. However, the starting position is all based on luck. Will looked up at the sky and exclaimed, teleporting that many people in the blink of an eye, it's unimaginable. The birds flew away following his announcement. Now, I declare the commencement of the selection exam for field training participants. He quickly jumped and lunged forward. First, he leaped onto a high tree branch to observe. Will began to cast a skill on himself. Concealed presence, hiding all life activities and masking his existence. Suddenly, a sound came from behind his back, drawing his attention. A group of two people was fighting a girl. On this side, the young man reached out to order, Go my golem. Erica saw it lunging and swung the hammer in her hand. I will crush you with this magic hammer. The girl on this side also blew a stream of cold air, blizzard. Will stood in the back, smiling as he observed. This is a good opportunity to observe all kinds of attack magic. If I only aimed to pass the exam, it would be a waste. He curled his lips into a deep smile. That's good. I want to use that move too. The young man and his golem had defeated the two girls on this side. Both were joyfully throwing their hands into the sky to cheer. All right, I took them both out. Did you see how strong my golem is? Suddenly, Will glided out behind him and replied, I saw it clearly. He reached out and grabbed the young man's head. After that, he activated magic to use the move, Sever Consciousness. The young man's eyes turned blank, losing all life. He fell backward with the momentum. Will placed his hand on his head and began to sense, manipulating the flow of vitality to make the opponent faint. I have to grab the opponent's head, so it's hard to use if the skill levels aren't too far apart, but it can control the enemy without causing much injury. Will broke out in a cold sweat and gave an awkward smile. This is a technique I thought of myself during special training with Professor Veronica. Luckily, it works. Suddenly, he looked vigilantly behind his back. 3 knives flew toward Will, but he quickly dodged them. He looked vigilantly at the sword stuck in the ground. Is this magic? After identifying it, Will exhaled a sigh of immense relief. He looked toward Ulps and 2 others who were approaching. Ulps, you really never learn. He reached out and began to sneer. Don't know what it means to learn, huh? I don't understand what the hell you're talking about. I'm just trying my best to pass this exam. All 3 simultaneously activated their magic with all the power I have. Will thought internally, so it's 3 against 1, huh? He unleashed sword lights that were bright orange. Create magic blade. The brown-haired boy next to him moved forward. Enchanted poison magic. All 3 used their abilities to launch swords toward Will. Dark shadow clone magic. Ulps laughed loudly, very smugly. These poison blades will target you directly. You only need to be hit once and it's over. And with this number, no matter how fast you are, don't even think about blocking them all. The swords flew rapidly toward Will. He looked up at the toxic blade tips and thought to himself, using restoration magic to detoxify is fine, but with this many, it's quite hard to just use physical enhancement to get through without a scratch. His hand began to manifest his own mana if it's this. Suddenly, a blurred image rolled toward his feet. The swords collided and stabbed into the afterimage, then bounced back. Ulps broke out in a cold sweat and couldn't believe it, shouting loudly, What the hell is that? The golem was now using its body to block in front of Will. He reached out and began to channel magic into it. Basically, restoration magic only works on living organisms, but this golem has an autonomous mechanism by using the caster's blood as a medium. In other words, it is a magical organism. He reached out and began to control the attack. Although it cannot perform complex actions like a living creature, as long as I channel vitality into it, I can control it. The golem quickly followed the order and lunged toward the three people. It swung a fist into the chest of the brown-haired boy, making him vomit blood. It turned and sat down, crushing another person. No. Ulp stood to the side and observed very impatiently. You guys, don't let yourselves be defeated that easily. Suddenly, an afterimage glided in front of him, startling him. Will's hand grabbed his face. He flashed a gentle smile and said, "All right, good night." The scene shifted to the golem fighting the two other players. Will stood on the tree observing, thinking, physical enhancement only works for melee, but golems can cover that weakness. Moreover, by doing this, I can leisurely observe everyone's attack magic. Suddenly, his eyes widened in surprise. From afar, a powerful tornado was sweeping up Will's body. Will was both panicked and suspicious. What just happened? Suddenly, a wave of magic was launched. Will gathered strength and leaped off the tree. That power destroyed nearly half the forest. Even the two students from earlier and the golem had fallen flat on the ground. Will looked extremely bewildered at the devastated scenery around him. From the dust, a familiar figure slowly walked forward. It was Sirius was activating magic and approaching. Will thought genius Sirius just as expected. The ability is really impressive. Defeating him won't be easy. He quickly put his hands in his pockets to defend himself. Should I try it? This. His eyes narrowed when he heard Ulnurum's announcement. Stop, that's enough. Everyone stopped hearing this announcement. Good work, everyone. The preliminary round ends here. The four people still standing have passed the preliminary round. Under everyone's feet, a teleportation formation appeared. The final will take place tomorrow at the arena, so rest until then. I will activate the teleportation magic. Everyone stand still. While being teleported, Will turned to look toward Sirius. He was also staring fixedly at Will with murderous intent. Will saw this and broke out in a cold sweat, thinking, it seems he is looking forward to tomorrow too. Tomorrow is the final. Everything quickly returned to peace as they left. The scene shifted to Will's room. He was sitting at his desk. He was writing something down. What should I do to kill time today? Outside the door, a noisy sound rang out. That's enough, Ulps. Two people following Ulps were desperately holding him back. That guy is really strong. Besides, it seems he even healed us when we were unconscious. Ulps turned back and glared with anger. Shut up. What the hell do you commoner nobles know? According to the Omen family training, being looked down upon by a healer is absolutely unacceptable. He turned his face away and began to calculate. If this gets out, I don't know what my father will say. The other two looked at each other and broke into a cold sweat without saying a word. Both sighed helplessly and turned to leave. Then do it yourself, Ulps, we're done. No one wants to get beaten up anymore. He panicked and shouted, wait. Both simultaneously ignored him and left. Ulps had an ugly expression, extremely angry. Whatever, I have to get rid of him. At this moment, Will was sitting leisurely eating cake and reading a book, completely unconcerned. Suddenly, a knock on the door interrupted him. He closed the book and stood up. At this hour, Will stepped outside and slowly opened the door, thinking to himself, I have a bad feeling about this. Ulps, with a friendly face, reached out to greet him. Hello, Will, good evening. Do you find the night beautiful tonight? He asked vigilantly, what kind of trick are you plotting? He smiled back in a friendly manner, plotting. I just want to have a peaceful conversation with you. Ulps reached out and started the conversation. Let's be frank, I hate you. I hate healers intensely. I've set up enough traps to kick you out of this academy. Will recalled the previous scenes and thought to himself, I've managed to break a few of those traps. Anyway, good night. He flashed a mystical smile. But I should have said it directly instead of beating around the bush like that. Ulps, with a stiff face, ordered very angrily, leave this academy, this is no place for healers. Will shook his head in refusal. I respect you for getting to this point, but why must you be so hostile toward me? He answered arrogantly, why you ask? I despise healers, why would I need a reason? Ulps pointed at himself very proudly. Even in the Omen family, anyone born a healer is sent away to remote branches. My brother was the same, a weak, useless guy. He started remembering his brother. Even when mocked, he would just smile it off. A proud attack mage and a pathetic healer are two completely different levels. Will darkened his face and replied, is that the education rooted in the minds of nobles. Ulp spread his arms wide with an authoritative tone. If you understand, then get out of Schwarz. This is no place for healers. Will's face hardened. You think I'm going to say I'll give up? He responded with absolute certainty. I'll make you say those words yourself. Greed flickered in Ulp's eyes. You have family you care about, don't you? His face tightened as he stared fixedly at him. What? With a smug expression, Ulps began to recount. I had my servants outside investigate you, Will. Growing up with your sister in a remote village, the two of you must be very close, right? Will's face visibly darkened. If I order my subordinates, what will happen to her? I'll let you imagine it yourself. He leaned in close to Will and asked, well, have you decided yet? He calmly replied, yes, I have decided. Just as he was about to put on airs, he was suddenly grabbed by the throat. If you understand, then get out right now. Pack your things. Will used his hand to forcefully shove him backward. He sat down and twisted his arm. Ulps trembled and pleaded, stop it. Will, with a completely indifferent expression, applied more force. I told you, didn't I? I have already decided. Ulps wept and screamed in despair. Stop. With a sharp scream, Ulps lay on the ground, wincing in pain. He continued to mutter, you think you'll get away with this? As long as I show them this broken arm, the academy won't let it slide. And my father, too. Will picked up his arm and cast healing magic. It's fine, I've already healed it. Ulps saw this and was terrified. What are you trying to do? His eyes rolled back and he screamed in pain. Ulps's arm was snapped again. Afterward, it was immediately healed by Will's magic. I'll heal it again. He lifted his arm nonchalantly, then broke it once more. He pleaded in pain, please no. He gave a reluctant smile in response. Come on, my determination isn't that shallow. Targeting me is one thing, but if you dare to touch my sister, I can't just sit still. The piercing screams continued incessantly. You must remember this clearly from the bottom of your heart. I have to break your will. Ulps lay on the ground, fallen into the abyss. What the hell is this guy? He looked at Will's smiling face. This is bad. He's a demon in a healer's skin. I absolutely must never mess with him again. I'll be living a life worse than death. After a fierce and intense moment, Will said, all right, good night, Ulps. He was waving goodbye to Ulps, who looked like a hollow shell. Don't forget the promise to never touch me again. Will stretched comfortably. Honestly, that felt quite refreshing. All right, time to sleep and prepare for tomorrow. The scene shifted to the next day. Will stood on the stage thinking, the main round is about to start. Ulnuram was up above, leaning his hands on the railing and observing below. Bode was sitting next to Veronica, also observing. Will thought to himself, the top 4 from the preliminaries will face off in a one-on-one knockout match. But he put his hands on his hips and said, I didn't expect you to make it through as well. Erica stood timidly in front of him. Erica helplessly recalled, I just created a wall of fire and used defensive tactics. It was also luck. Actually, I didn't take anyone down. Will heard this and was helpless, an attack-type mage who defends from start to finish. That's a rare find. He stared fixedly at Erica, worried inside. But can you hold out if you keep playing like that? She spoke timidly. We are friends after all. Why don't you go easy on me a little? Will replied decisively. No way, I knew it. She reached out to take a combat stance. Anyway, I've passed the minimum score, so now I'll just try my best. Seeing this, the referee raised a hand to signal. Then the match begins. Erica broke into a cold sweat and cast her magic. Come on. She launched a fireball toward Will. He quickly used his hand to form a shield to defend himself. His face remained unchanged as he thought, orthodox fire magic. With fire power at this level, my healing magic can still handle it just fine. Will looked opposite and muttered, sorry Erica, but I can clean this up easily. Suddenly, Will's face became incredibly surprised. Something is wrong, this is. Erica continued to launch another fireball. It's not over yet. Will quickly dodged to the side so the fire wouldn't get close. He looked on in surprise at the flames surrounding him. The flames that hit me are burning continuously and won't go out. This is Erica's special magic. Fire magic with abnormally persistent properties. Even though the destructive power is average, being complacent and letting myself get hit repeatedly, thinking I can heal it in time, would be very dangerous. The image of that plan surfaced. Last time I borrowed her fire, it burned for a long time too. Turns out it wasn't just the salamander tail property, but her own ability at play too. Using this to create a wall of fire is indeed hard to pierce through, but finally, Will felt a bit helpless and concluded that it truly reflected Erica's persistent personality. The students in the stands cheered for Erica. That girl is pretty good, take down that healer. Gradually, she became even more confident. Oh my, could I actually win against Will? Right, I did pass the preliminaries. Just like that, Erica bravely shouted, if you want to surrender, now is the time. But her opponent calmly replied, it's fine, I'm about to counterattack. She instinctively said, of course, before realizing something was wrong. A fireball stronger than the previous one was launched. This time it will definitely hit. The corner of Will's mouth curled into a smirk. If this fire refuses to go out. He reached out his palm to touch the fire. Executing a plan I've mapped out, I'll use it to attack directly. Witnessing the scene, Erica thought in shock, using my own flames, a fire punch. Having let her guard down for a second, Will appeared right in front of her. Her face turned pale. Erica shrank back and gasped. I surrender, causing him to halt in his tracks. Because she was too scared, she slumped to the ground. The announcer's voice came through the speakers. The winner, Will. From the stands there were low insults. Even so, Will felt no anger. Even if you win, healers aren't respected at all. However, they turned and insulted Erica. Don't surrender so easily, and you call yourself an attack mage. Making her hold her head, trembling in fear. Just a moment ago they were cheering for her. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. He held her hand to comfort her. Don't worry about it, I think Erica fought very well. At the same time, he also healed Erica. You will definitely have a chance to pass. Looking at their joined hands, she called out blankly, Will. The romantic scene was broken by the appearance of someone. No way, that cannot happen. Erica grabbed Will's shirt in fear. Bode sneered, raising a finger, just try to think about it, and spewed out words that were anything but pleasant. Healers are just useless trash. Surrendering to that kind of trash makes you even worse than trash. Just like that, Bode radiated a terrifying aura as he made his decision. You obviously failed. Get lost right now so you don't bother anyone. She trembled, trying her best to answer, I'm leaving now. While Erica was already gone, he turned to rebuke the other man. Isn't it too much to talk to a student like that? He used his position as field training supervisor as an excuse. If the level of the participants is too low, I have to tell them straight, don't I? It's called tough love. As he spoke, Bode turned away, but his words seemed to imply something. It seems only one person can pass this year. Suddenly, a tiny voice sounded behind Will. You're in the way. Turning his head, he saw a familiar face. Serious, since when were you? And speak up a bit. As he walked past him, he carefully asked, do you think the same as Professor Bode? And the answer from Sirius was, ultimately, strength is everything. Professor Bode is right because he is strong. Everyone has their own opinion. Will couldn't refute anything. I understand. His tiny voice rang out, but I don't think you are weak either, so. Sirius turned his head, placing his trust in him. I hope you will use your full strength. He frowned, looking seriously at the person in front of him. The familiar name truly brought back many memories. Sirius Blue Note. Come to think of it, in my past life, I heard about a terrifyingly strong attack mage of my generation on the northern front. The winds he created swept everything away, and simultaneously defeated many opponents. This power truly swept everything. Finally, the final match arrived, Will versus Sirius. Before the match, Will initiated the conversation. Judging by Professor Bode's attitude, it seems I won't be acknowledged unless I win. A confident and familiar smile appeared on his face. So I will definitely win. Opposite him, Sirius calmly replied, is that so? Waiting for the two candidates to finish speaking, the referee shouted, selection exam final match start. A blast of wind appeared from beneath his feet. A giant wind was launched by a hand much smaller than it. Will gently dodged to the side. He stomped his feet with force, and electric sparks were released outward. Will used his power to leap toward his opponent. Sirius's face became clearer and clearer. Suddenly, a great wind rose, forcing him to retreat. The force was so strong Will had to cover himself with his hands. After a moment of trading blows, he didn't rush into attack like usual. I see I really can't get close. Who will win this match, Will or Sirius? The result will be known soon. Dust appeared in the arena. Sirius spoke wearily. Too fast, how annoying. Magic power gathered in his palm. Then how about this? A powerful wind appeared, but in a different form than the wind pillar from earlier. Will also realize the difference. It's not a tornado. This is a wind blast blowing away a large area. He was also casting magic on himself. At this rate, I'll be blown off the stage. He then crouched and placed his palm on the ground. I have to use this then. A strange phenomenon occurred. A tiny plant gradually grew up. And finally, it sprouted into a large tree. Sitting in the stands, Erica thought in shock, is that also healing magic? Admiration for Will emerged. Will is even stronger now. Regarding this technique, he was extremely confident. Professor Veronica, what do you think? A leaf fell from the tree. Below was Veronica's bewildered expression. What is this? Will stepped forward to explain why the tree grew from the ground. I channeled life energy into the plant to make it grow rapidly. I read about attack magic that controls plants in the library and thought I could do it too. With this move, my tactics will be diverse depending on the plant species. Suddenly, his vision blurred. Caught off guard, Will's swaying body was supported by her. Veronica calmly lifted him up and asked, are you okay? He scratched his head and asked carefully, I'm fine, but is this me running out of mana? He scratched his face without paying attention. The book didn't say this move was this exhausting. She suddenly said in a low voice, so that's how it is? He asked suspiciously, what do you mean? She had to explain the situation. Destruction is always easier than healing. Healing magic consumes mana much more dreadfully than attack magic. When using healing magic to attack, the efficiency of mana usage is certainly extremely low. It was another new piece of knowledge he needed to absorb. I understand. I have to carefully consider the timing before using it. Finally, back in the present, Will was very confident, thinking, and this is that moment. From the beginning, I had no aptitude for attack magic. I will overcome all these disadvantages. But facing the large tree in front, Sirius calmly raised his hand. The tree was instantly split in two by a sharp wind. This move is, he didn't expect the wind blades to appear. He even has that move too. Will's mind listed the types of moves he used. A tornado swallowing the enemy brutally, a gale blowing away a large area. Wind blades cutting through hardwood. Anyone getting close is blown away by the tornado surrounding him. After listing them, he concluded, magic is too strong, not a single opening. Indeed, it's the level of a top contender. However, Will would not give up easily, but I have decided to become strong using this very magic. Thinking this, he immediately lunged forward. Once again protected by the wind, Sirius said calmly, no matter how many times you try, you will never be able to touch me. His whole body was sent flying away, but the corner of his mouth curled into a smile. Noticing that, he couldn't help but feel puzzled. Suddenly, a sharp plant grew up, piercing through Sirius's shoulder. After doing it, it immediately went back into the ground, leaving him astonished. What is this? Will stood up kindly to answer the question. Your tornado couldn't protect you underground, right? This type of plant roots deep and can sprout up anywhere. Actually, they are called rhizomes, not roots. Glancing at the familiar figure behind the stands, Sirius clicked his tongue in annoyance. Lost in thought for a moment, he curiously asked, you care about Professor Bode that much? You two don't seem to get along at all. Bode was frowning and scowling as he watched the match below. The answer was quite simple. He is strong and he taught me. But Will didn't believe it for a second. Just because of that, you don't need to learn from him. You come from a prestigious family, right? The other man fell silent for a moment before beginning to tell his story. In my clan, magic power is everything. Age and gender don't matter. The strongest is the one who leads. Because of that, everyone is an enemy competing for the inheritance. Even my father refused to teach me magic. Hearing that, Will felt quite uncomfortable and muttered, that kind of family. Sirius just concluded by saying, so for me, following the professor is the best way to become stronger. Once the conversation finished, the fight resumed. Are you done? The shoulder you hit is still hurting like hell. Everyone watched the immense power ahead with fear. Will smiled awkwardly as he looked at the scene before him. A dragon created from wind appeared. Let's end this. The dragon lunged swiftly toward the opponent. Now Sirius was truly getting serious. Lately, deep inside, I kept thinking that those attack mages were just playing around, that I was the one putting in more effort, fighting without any innate talent, but it really is true. Having talent doesn't mean you are superior or better than others. Status, talent, or background, everyone is equal. Because of that, he suddenly laughed and blurted out, Sirius, right now I really want to defeat you, just telling myself that. The two stood face to face just like sworn enemies. What kind of declaration is that? A magic circle appeared on the ground. Come forth, my best seed. Huge branches immediately grew out, with lush leaves sprouting outward. Between the massive trunk appeared a magic circle. The tree was named Yggdrasil. It is a type of tree that usually requires a lot of time to grow huge, but forcing it to grow this fast would consume much more mana than other species. The dragon and the tree collided powerfully, but the more mana I poured in, the higher it grew. The force of the wind was so strong it forced Will to retreat. The dragon finally shattered the tree, causing Sirius to sigh with relief from afar. A branch was blown into the sky by the wind, but it wasn't a branch, it was the giant tree trunk itself. He hadn't expected his vision to be deceived. Sirius was so shocked he blurted out, "What?" Once again he had to explain clearly. This type of tree has extremely intense vitality, even a single branch can become enormous. Since Sirius was creating a wind dragon, he wouldn't have time to defend. Finally, the tree trunk crashed down onto the ground. Sirius was trying to crawl out from under the massive tree, pinning him down. Before him was Will, standing firmly with his sword pointed at Sirius. Drowning out Will's panting was the commentator's voice. The winner, Will. The event left everyone in the stands shocked. They began to buzz with discussion. Hey, that healer actually won. He took down Sirius in a one-on-one duel. Maybe he really is strong. From the moment the match was decided, Sirius had been silently bowing his head. Will extended his hand with the good intention of helping him up, remarking, "That was close, no wonder you're a genius." But contrary to that warmth was Sirius's disappointment. Still not good enough. Will was surprised to hear this. He commented on the match, "What do you mean by not good enough? That was a wonderful match." At the same time, a voice rang out, "How disappointing," accompanied by a powerful bolt of lightning striking directly onto the arena floor. Smoke rose after the aftermath of the lightning. Sirius took the hit head-on and passed out. Bode walked over and easily used his foot to break the tree trunk, pinning Sirius down. He used one hand to lift him up skillfully. Bode just carried Sirius away, angry and disappointed in him. "You failed, Sirius, I will retrain you." His words made the people in the stands gasp. That's too harsh. Bode imposed his own thinking on everyone and became increasingly angry. The crowd down there thinks like me too. There is no way I will accept a healer winning first place. Seeing his aggressive attitude, no one in the stands dared to resist. They didn't even dare to move. Only Will, who dared to speak up and was the one with the most right to speak at that moment, was frustrated by his words. "That's too much. I am the winner, but that doesn't mean Sirius is weak. That was an evenly matched fight, and if we fought again." Bode's gaze toward him became extremely fierce. He didn't want to hear objections. "Don't you dare talk back to me. A good match, you say, a promise for the future. You fools, on the battlefield, strength is everything. Losing means being treated like trash and dying, that's it." Will sensed the ugliness in this man's personality. He felt resentful for Sirius, even his own student. Will confidently pointed at himself. "Then I have already defeated Sirius, haven't I? I have proven my strength." The rage in Bode's heart grew even larger. His voice became terrifyingly low. That level of strength. Bode slowly walked over and loomed over Will to put pressure on him. But he remained calm and began to reason with him. "It's true we can't fight, but we support everyone with healing magic. It's a division of roles. If we don't know how to work together, humanity will perish." Bode listened to this and fell silent for a moment, his facial muscles still not relaxing at all. Bode made a motion as if brushing dust off his shirt, his voice flat. "My student held the front lines to save you healers so you could run away. Yet, those healers were wiped out pathetically by weaklings while running away. My students, left broken and with nowhere to return to, have all died. You can't even stand firm on the battlefield and you couldn't save my students. Just because of trash like that, why did Sirius have to sacrifice himself?" When the last word ended, it was also the moment he had his fist ready, aimed at Will. He stood motionless while hearing about the hidden pain the man had been burying. Will also acknowledged that Professor Bode had a point. Thinking of this, countless images from the battlefield flashed through his mind. Then he reminded himself, but an era where monsters become more ferocious is about to arrive. When that happens, those holding power are not allowed to be selfish anymore. He clenched his hand into a fist and slowly spoke. "In that case, those who have nothing in their hands like me need to become even stronger. If I defeat you, will you acknowledge me?" Bode lowered his hand, his lips curling into a smirk, treating what he just said like a joke. Bode turned to instruct the referee of the previous match. "Hey you, as soon as I declare the match started, take that kid and get out of here." The man was surprised and wanted to ask again to confirm. "Professor Bode, don't tell me you intend to actually fight," Bode answered with certainty. "Once it's a selection, I make the rules." The referee, while carrying Sirius away, glanced at Will once, filled with worry. But in his eyes at that moment was determination, not a single trace of fear. Seeing the scene before him, the referee could only shake his head and sigh. As he took Sirius out of the arena, a tougher fight officially began. The special match Bode versus Will began. Bode rubbed his hands together to warm up, and a powerful energy was generated. He was filled with confidence and contempt for his opponent. I will prove to you just how low your level is. Bode's overbearing aura and power made Will slightly wary. My mana is almost out, and this opponent is the strongest one yet. I won't win by fighting normally, first I have to use this. Looking at the way he activated his technique, Bode also attacked. Too slow. Will looked up, the light from Bode's magic shone on his face. His attack was incredibly powerful, as if wanting to tear through space. After that attack, the aftermath left only spreading dust and smoke. Bode held up 3 fingers on his hand, extremely smug. Let me teach you the 3 reasons why my victory is absolute. First, the overwhelming range to control the enemy. Second, the speed that leaves the opponent helpless. And finally, the power to finish it in one blow. The opponent can no longer do anything, it's over. Or can you not hear anything anymore? When he thought the enemy had failed, Will's voice slowly rang out. Where is the finish in one blow? Contrary to what he was hoping for, Will remained steady, kneeling on the ground. His body had a few scratches, but they were negligible. He had successfully calculated everything. I knew Bode possessed special lightning magic. To minimize damage from electricity, I must avoid getting hit directly in the body. Even if I'm skilled, if the brain or heart is hit, healing magic can't save me in time. So I created a blood vessel that conducts electricity extremely well. Conducting electricity from my arm down to my legs and then straight into the ground, dispersing the current to minimize damage. Doing this much was just enough to hold out. Will manifested his power once more, feeling more confident. Now it's my turn to counterattack. Bode scratched his head, still full of contempt. Looks like you had to fight for your life to endure that hit, but Will didn't pay much attention to his words. He continued to channel his internal energy, physical enhancement. The unexpected happened. He couldn't execute the technique. His body felt devoid of strength, causing him to stumble forward. He looked at his 2 hands. His body was shaking violently. What? I can't channel strength into my body. Bode had guessed it. He explained the mechanism of his technique. The absolute rule is that anyone hit by my deadly lightning will be paralyzed and unable to move. Will still refused to give up. He raised the hand that had been pierced by the knife to attack, accompanied by an exclamation, "This is bad." Bode's smug smile appeared again. He maintained his disdain for others. Remembering back, you were fine a moment ago. Bode attacked him directly once again. This time it seemed even more powerful than before. In the stands, Erica was worried for him to the point of tears. Will was still trying to resist the rapid-fire magic waves. He cursed internally. Damn it, he really is strong. His unique magic really has no openings. Now I understand why he's so arrogant. Even so, I've decided I will win. As soon as that thought was set, Will placed his hand on the ground. This is my last seed and also my last magic spell. Plant manipulation. Grow water guardian tree. As soon as he finished speaking, a massive tree grew up to block the view. Will had calculated everything very carefully for this move. This species absorbs and stores a huge amount of water from the soil. If I use it as a shield, the lightning will be dispersed. Bode was still overwhelmingly confident. He believed that move of his couldn't do anything to him. So what? Accompanied by that question was the surprise in Will's eyes. Everyone in the stands was gaping in amazement at this point. The guardian tree just created by Will's magic was now snapped in 2 by Bode, unable to resist. Looking at the tree in front being destroyed, Will shouted in disbelief. Impossible. Bode walked over to him full of confidence. He continued to show contempt. That's your final move, finishing with such a pathetic defensive move. But when he walked closer to the tree, Bode discovered a mushroom growing on the trunk. Then, as if catalyzed, a forest of mushrooms began to sprout endlessly. Of course, this stunned Bode. He shouted in confusion, "What the hell is this?" Will, while pulling the knife out of his palm, smiled coldly. I didn't expect it to be this effective. Some plant and mushroom species have spores that grow at lightning speed after being struck by lightning. A forest burned to ashes is the perfect development opportunity because there's no competition, right? This foam blower mushroom is one of them, but that's not its only characteristic. Bode involuntarily watched thousands of mushrooms growing. He still couldn't believe it. What? Not long after, a strange sensation spread throughout his body, making him panic. Bode looked at his arm. At this moment, his whole body felt like it had electricity running through it. My whole body is numb. Will seize the golden opportunity. Now is the time. He lunged forward with a punch filled with his own strength. Faced with that situation, Bode was not worried at all. He was still smiling. Bode quickly counterattacked. He punched Will directly, sending him flying. Will couldn't react in time to the counterpunch. He fell directly. Looking at Will kneeling there made him despise him even more. Fool, obviously I'm superior in close combat. My specific magic is electricity control. If I use electricity to enhance my body and move at high speeds, that little bit of numbness is nothing at all. Will's body shook. He clenched his hands to steady his body. He still couldn't believe it. No way, even after going this far, I still can't win. Bode's gaze became sharp. He gritted out each word clearly as if passing judgment. Then you have lost. As the words ended, Bode prepared to unleash the final blow to finish him off. But at this moment, Veronica appeared. She pointed her sword at Bode, demanding him to stop. That's enough. Isn't this going a bit too far? Professor Bode. Bode paused slightly, laughing sarcastically. He turned and pushed her sword away. Veronica, don't interfere when you're just a rookie. Will, trembling over there, realized he had a savior, Professor Veronica. Veronica wanted things to end here, she argued logically. The match is over. Going further will only hurt him for nothing. Bode protested. This kid can heal his own wounds, he can still fight. Veronica continued to try to protect Will. Only when he still has mana, he doesn't have enough mana left. The more he heard, the angrier Bode became. He wanted to attack Veronica as well. He just lacks the will to fight. She didn't back down. Veronica began to gather her aura, ready to fight. There's nothing left to discuss. Both of them lunged at each other, signaling a massive conflict about to break out. But luckily, just at this moment, a voice rang out, stopping the intense willpower of those two. That's enough, both of you. Ulnuram appeared, looking down at the two of them from above. Ulnuram spoke up to warn them that it would be pointless for the two of them to keep fighting here. He descended slowly, gentle as silk. Ulnuram looked toward Bode and said calmly, Bode, stop it. He closed his eyes with a warning in them. Bode could sense that his expression was uneasy. But this order wasn't to be argued with, so Bode scratched his head and agreed, all right then. Only then did Ulnuram turn to Veronica. His expression changed completely compared to when he looked at Bode. Veronica, I apologize for not explaining clearly. He put a hand over his mouth and cleared his throat a few times to draw everyone's attention. Ulnuram officially announced, the main portion of the field training selection ends here, everyone disperse at once. People didn't linger and slowly moved out of the arena. Will was still struggling to heal himself. He grimaced in pain, damn it, I'm out of mana, the treatments aren't working, I don't want to lose, is the gap really this big? Veronica said nothing and simply lifted him up. Will was extremely flustered, even calling her name was difficult, Professor Veronica. She calmly comforted and encouraged him. You've done very well, don't push yourself, rest now. Will sheepishly bowed his head. He whispered, I understand, but inside he still wasn't satisfied. Done very well, huh? That's still not enough. And night slowly passed. Walking along the road, Will kept thinking to himself that was the attack mage's power at its peak, not just raw strength, but a level of tactical sophistication entirely different. But even with them, humanity would be doomed. I need to be stronger. He arrived at a room, Will opened the door, looked inside and said politely, may I come in? Ulnuram was inside. He greeted him warmly, Will, glad you came. He stroked his beard and asked after him with concern. Your wounds seem all right, just as I predicted, or rather, without waiting for him to ask further, Will explain directly that once mana recovers, these minor injuries will heal immediately. Ulnuram laughed heartily and confirmed, then participating in the field training won't be a problem. Hearing this surprised Will, and he asked again to be sure I'm allowed to join. Ulnuram took it as obvious. You won the main event, of course you are, besides you, Sirius and Erica also passed. Will still seemed incredulous. But sir, Professor Bode said everyone failed and I didn't even win. Ulnuram understood and explained, it's like that every year. This surprised Will again every year. Ulnuram revealed Bode's purpose. He says failing everyone is meant to create pressure to awaken students' true potential, but in the end he still passes a few people. After all, field training involves many dangers. It's how he proves himself as a proper teacher. Will assessed, the man is awkward, but I can see his reasoning. In his past life, Bode always fought on the front lines for humanity. No doubt he was one of the heroes who strove to save the world. Even if I dislike his words and actions, he has his own pride. Without keeping Will waiting, Ulnuram quickly gave him his assignment. Now, Will, you'll form a team with students from other academies as an attack mate, and you'll carry out monster hunting missions. In truth, Will was still dazed. He kept repeating those 4 words to himself, monster hunting missions. This is the first time I've faced monsters since my reset. 5 years later in my previous life, these monsters were the direct cause of humanity's extinction. First, we must mention their origin. Monster originally referred to any creature possessing magical power. Not every monster is hostile to humanity. They sometimes attack humans, but that's survival behavior, part of natural competition. If you understand their ecology, they can be neighbors you can make use of. However, in about 2 years the world will change. The blood moon, monsters exposed to that red moonlight become extremely savage. And from then on the tragedy begins. Monsters gather together and start slaughtering humans simply for the sake of killing. 2 years after that, the Demon King descends to the mortal realm. Humanity quickly falls into a disadvantageous position. Many die and nations collapse. Attack mages are highly valued on the battlefield, but because of that they are sacrificed one after another. The same happens to outstanding knights. Healers don't go to the front lines. Once the battle lines break, there's nothing left but to be wiped out by monsters. By the time I died, there was almost no one left who could fight. Within months, humanity would be extinct. Will clenched his fist and vowed to himself, I cannot let that tragedy repeat. I must become stronger than anyone from my previous life, and seize power to fight the massive monster invasion. And if possible, find the cause, the blood moon's origin that makes monsters brutal. Ulnuram saw him brooding, stroked his beard and remarked, that's quite determination. Your gaze looks like the day we first met. He gently encouraged him, keep this up and you'll be fine. Will felt a bit anxious. Fine, huh, the teachers take field training very seriously. Ulnuram walked over and put a hand on his shoulder, looking amused. That's part of it, but I especially wanted to speak with you. Will looked at him puzzled, eyes wide and naive like a startled fawn. After talking with Ulnuram, Will went to the assembly point for those selected for field training. He and Erica were already there. They were just waiting for the remaining person, Sirius. After a while there was movement. Sirius arrived and ahead of him strode the burly Bode. Will stepped in front of him and spoke first. I've heard you're strict because you care about your students. Bode leaned his face close to Will's and let out a fierce shout. He stood up straight with hands on his hips, voice full of ferocity. I don't know what you're talking about, but you're weak trash. If you can't land a hit on me, don't be arrogant. Will felt embarrassed by his attitude and whispered yes, inwardly grumbling that his attitude hadn't changed at all. Bode passed by him huffing. If you understand, then focus on the field training, you idiot. But I'll thank you for taking care of Sirius. At that moment, Sirius, standing behind him, also spoke up slowly. Me too. Will was startled by his sudden appearance behind him. Sirius, Will thought to himself, still so taciturn. Sirius clenched his fist and punched the air to show determination. Thanks, because of that I can give my all in training and become stronger. That's Professor Bode's lesson. As long as you survive and can take revenge, it's not a loss. Will shared the same energy. He raised his hand to bump fists. Good, you must keep getting strong. Sirius smirked with a cheerful smile. He reached out to bump fists with Will as a promise. Then he quickly moved over to Bode. Will watched him go, quietly grateful. Having more outstanding attack mages is a good thing. It will surely make the fight against the monsters easier. From afar, Veronica reminded him, Will, we should head out too. Will replied cheerfully, I'm looking forward to this trip as well. On the way to the field training site, inside the carriage, Veronica announced, We'll soon reach Dunkel Forest. Let me confirm the training details. This time you'll be assigned to clear goblins in Dunkel Forest. 3 trainees from Schwarz, Heilig, and Silburn will form a 4-person team with an instructor from one of the schools to assist. Erica asked, have the team members already been decided? Veronica confirmed to her, yes, Erica is on my team too. Erica thought to herself that it was better than being paired with strangers, though Professor Veronica was a bit intimidating. Then Veronica briefly described Will's teammates. Your team isn't ordinary either. We're here. Veronica led the way, stepping down first and announcing, let's go. Participants from Silburn seem to be here already. Will also stepped out of the carriage, recalling his past life and confirming, Silburn, I knew of them in my previous life, but we aren't really acquainted now. Suddenly a sweet female voice called out, Lord Will. Marie rushed over and hugged Will tightly. I've been waiting for the day to meet you. Her action stunned everyone standing there. Will was squeezed breathless. He politely raised his hands in the air and said, wait, sorry, but I don't know who you are. Marie realized she had overdone it and she let go of him. Oh, right. After all, we didn't really have a proper conversation back then. She then officially introduced herself. I'm Marie Goldgren, granddaughter of Schwarz Academy's headmaster Ulnuram Goldgren. Upon her introduction, Will realized she was the girl from before. His memories of Marie now flashed clearly through his mind. Will was a bit surprised and murmured that he hadn't expected to meet the girl he once healed at the headmaster's house here. He asked about her health. Since then, how have you been? Marie flexed both hands to confirm, completely fine, sir. I'm sorry I couldn't properly thank you back then. Will hurriedly waved his hand, it's fine. My grandfather already recommended you to Schwarz Academy. Marie pointed to herself and insisted, but I still want to find a way to repay this favor. Since I don't have magical talent, I joined Silburn Academy and poured myself into sword training. Thanks to that, I topped my academy's recruitment. Will was surprised by her talent and couldn't help exclaiming, top of the class, really. Marie shyly covered the corner of her smiling mouth. Turns out I'm gifted with the sword. Will could only let out an astonished wow. He looked at the petite girl before him and assessed silently. To rise from bedridden to top the class in such a short time, she's no joke. She stepped forward, took his hand and lifted it up. I'll definitely be of help to you, Lord Will. That's why we're on the same team. After understanding her better, Will happily agreed. If that's the case, let's do our best together. At that moment, Will realized something. So this was the headmaster's plan when he said he was counting on me. Marie noticed a carriage approaching them. She quickly grabbed Will's hand and ran off. Heilig Academy's people have arrived, let's go greet them. Erica was also surprised by how quickly they bonded. They seemed to be having fun. Veronica added, we should liven up our team's atmosphere a bit. Marie took his hand and led him to the carriage, fidgeting as she searched, where are our team members? Is Lord Ren and Lord Turf here? He reacted slightly when he heard the name Ren Huh. A voice from inside the carriage replied calmly, don't rush me, I'm coming out now. The person finally stepped down from the carriage. He introduced himself and asked the first question, I am Ren. Are you the students joining my team? This man was Heilig Academy instructor Ren Kaidos. Upon seeing him, Will became extremely excited. Master. He was the master who taught me healing magic in my previous life. The best healer I ever knew. He was so happy his body trembled slightly, being on the same team like this. Behind Ren was another person. The young man called out to him, teacher, step aside a bit, I can't get down. When he stepped down, Marie quickly greeted him first. You must be Lord Turf, I'm Marie from Silburn. Turf pushed up his glasses and politely replied, pleased to meet you all. After adjusting his glasses, Turf saw Will and Marie holding hands tightly and was struck like a thunderbolt. The excitement and cheerfulness vanished, leaving only indifference and you. Will didn't notice, he cheerfully introduced himself, I'm Will from Schwarz. Turf turned away, voice tinged with disappointment and a hint of contempt. An attack mage, huh. After everyone finished introducing themselves, Ren turned and yawned. All right, this is Ren's group, do as you please, I will just observe. Marie was a bit surprised by his laissez-faire attitude, working like that. Will treated it as routine, master is always like that. He quietly followed behind him. Will made a request, may I call you master? Ren was slightly surprised by the proposal, why call me that? Will quickly explained his reason. I can use healing magic too, but I currently have no instructor, so I thought I could learn from you. Ren was amazed at his ability, a combat mage who also knows healing magic. I vaguely heard about this before, truly an intentionally arranged team. Will asked again to confirm, is that okay, master? Ren didn't mind the formality and accepted, call me whatever you like. Marie, overhearing the exchange, joined in. If Lord Will calls you that, I'll call you master too. Turf, trailing behind like Marie's shadow, called after her, "Wait, Marie." Erica was once again surprised at how quickly Will and his teammates adapted and became close. Veronica didn't want to be outdone. "We can't fall behind either. In this operation, each team will take responsibility for a designated area. We'll use this tent as our base. The goblins' territory lies a bit deeper, so Will, Marie, and Master should depart immediately. As in real combat, the healer won't go to the front line but will stay at the base. That's why I didn't participate in my previous life." On the way, Marie asked, "Even though Master is a healer, will you still go to the front line?" Ren explained quickly, "Basically, I'm the supervisor for this. I'm fine, do whatever you students want. I don't like rigid constraints either." Marie matched his laid-back rhythm, "Then I won't be formal either." Will hesitated slightly and pointed behind her. "By the way, not being formal, what I mean is." Marie realized that, of course. She quickly prepared to draw her weapon. Marie gripped the massive greatsword with both hands, confident and ready to unleash her full strength. "I'll swing the sword with everything I've got." After finishing off the monsters, Marie happily hopped on the ground, then jumped onto the pile of monster corpses she had just cleared to celebrate the victory. The huge contrast made Will wonder was that this girl, the girl who used a gentle face to call him Lord Will. Marie launched herself and swung the gigantic greatsword with a determined look in her eyes. Will looked up in stunned admiration. This was Marie's swordsmanship, each strike carrying terrifying power. Perhaps she alone could clear this place out. Just as he recovered, Marie suddenly froze, eyes wide in surprise. Seeing the monsters closing in, she exclaimed, "There are so many of them." Ren, observing Marie's stance, murmured an assessment. "She's certainly impressive but exposes too many openings. The young lady is great at wide area attacks but seems weak when surrounded." "Cover her," Will heard and quickly replied, "Understood." He fell silent for a moment, elated. "At last I'm about to fight monsters." A monster charged with razor teeth and a roar that shattered the quiet of the place. Will's expression darkened as he thought to himself, "Those terrifying monsters." A hand suddenly touched Will's shoulder from behind, sending a chill down his spine. A calm, deep voice sounded, "Why are your shoulders so tense? Relax." Will looked up with a pensive, slightly surprised expression and did not reply. After a while, he smiled faintly and replied friendly, "Yes." Will thought to himself, just like before, this person is the same. His fingertips touched together, forming a blinding source of power. Will raised his hands to cast a spell called Body Enhancement. The tips of his boots shifted slightly, his starting stance ready to sprint. Will dashed forward, and with only a few light sword strikes had nearly slain half the monsters. Two backs immediately collided. "They're counting on you over there, yes." Will quickly seized the advantage, wielding his sword with authority as blood sprayed everywhere. He seemed to relax and exhaled comfortably, so this is what fighting with healing magic feels like. In an instant the monsters were completely annihilated, sprawled on the ground. He thought to himself, not bad at all. Good, it works on monsters too. Will picked up the knife and pondered. The blade Professor Veronica gave him was sharply honed, very different from Ulps's knife. Marie joyfully jumped up, heart blooming, her explosive strength like a spring combined with skilled swordplay. "Lord Will is amazing." Ren, standing in the middle, suddenly spoke, "All right, that's enough for the first day. Let's return." The smile at her lips faded. Marie looked down, resigned, suddenly feeling much lighter. Will added, "That's thanks to you, Master." He thought to himself quietly, if you evaluate healing magic it would have metrics like wound severity or what illnesses can be cured. But Master's strength is recovery speed, healing so naturally that one might not even notice magic is being used. Because of that, non-healers can't grasp how remarkable it is. I once asked him about it. Suddenly he waved his hand and smiled calmly. "I can't be doing flashy displays like that. As long as they're healed, that's all that matters." Ren walked on, leaving falling leaves in the lonely forest behind. The world didn't know, but the greatest healer in the world was Ren. Still, this was a pretty good squad. The four sat clustered around the mess table and Ren broke the silence directly. "Score for today achieved." Turf also suddenly spoke up. "Everyone's back and no one is injured, so I didn't really have to do anything." Ren raised his bowl and praised loudly, "Not at all. Supplying recovery through mess meals is also a healer's duty, right? That bowl is Turf's special recovery soup with Ren's seasoning." Turf looked up and said softly, "You've done very well, Master." He snorted and spoke politely, "That flavor is partly thanks to my special spice." Marie opposite laughed with delight and flattered, "Master is truly amazing, not only as a healer but also clearly knowledgeable about the front lines. I wonder why." Ren nodded contentedly and explained, "The front line is where most people get wounded. If you heal them there, basic knowledge naturally accumulates." Turf added, "Master travels to many different locations often. That's why he rarely teaches formal classes." Will sipped his soup and enjoyed it. "Aren't those locations dangerous? I'm confident in my ability to run away, though." Ren raised his hand and spoke firmly, "I say that, but unless it's to save someone, I never run away." Losing the Master would be a devastating blow to humanity. Not just because he's an excellent healer, but because he's one of the few who knows what to do in real combat situations. Will thought to himself, destiny may have changed for me and the others, but there's still time before that incident happens. His gaze narrowed, more pensive than ever. No one knew why he kept scooping soup and swearing he'd never let Master die in this life. Will lifted the big bowl and gulped quickly. Ren, seeing that, awkwardly said, "Your appetite's quite something." "Make another bowl then, master is wonderful." The little tent buzzed louder than ever. Meanwhile, someone was quietly marshalling his troops in the dark night. A hand formed an eye-shaped sigil emitting a great power, the power of the blood moon. Right there the monsters grinned savage smiles with blood-red, bloodshot eyes. At the same time, a massive foot stepped forward from within. It was an orc, one of the higher-rank monsters. The next day we set out again to exterminate goblins once more. We shared lessons from yesterday's battle and team coordination improved noticeably. We even said at this pace the mission could be finished by tomorrow. Yet the three of them stood straight with expressions not very pleased. Their feet still planted on the soft, verdant grass strip. Ren called out, making Will and Marie both turn to look. "Let's head back." Marie suddenly objected, her tone questioning why. "We haven't taken down a single one today." Will asked, "Is something up ahead?" Ren did not answer, only explained calmly, "On the contrary, there are no traces of anything. Goblins have a strong territorial instinct. If an outsider invades, they rush out to attack like yesterday, but we've come this far and still haven't seen a single one." A voice rang out, "You just noticed." "What's going on?" He sighed and cautiously lowered his voice to answer, "I don't know, but on the battlefield you should trust your instincts." Ren turned and waved an order, "That's it for today, return. And while you're at it, call another nearby group to rendezvous." Marie looked up and blurted out, "I believe Professor Veronica's group has a base nearby." Hearing that, Ren turned back with a faint smile, the corner of his eye curling. "You really have good intel, let's go." Will stepped forward, scanning the surroundings bit by bit with his eyes. The three walked through the wild mountains and forest, not a single animal in sight, behavior abnormal compared to their habits. It felt awful. Marie led the way, brushing aside branches to clear the path. Will reach the road near the nearby base. Sunlight was gradually shining dazzlingly through the leaves, creating a warm space. I couldn't stop thinking about my past life, even knowing it was impossible, but Will suddenly froze, his face darkening. He saw a small hand tightly bound by a thick rope. A small face, pitch black with no smile, staring fixedly downward. It was Erica. She was bound fast to a straight wooden post. Marie rushed forward, waving her hand and shouting excitedly, "I'll save you right now." She stepped forward quickly, not noticing that her small feet were perilously close to danger. Marie instantly tumbled into the trap, mud and dirt smeared everywhere. Will shouted loudly from a distance. She pulled something out from behind with a determined expression. That thing was being quickly dragged out of the ground by Marie. She raised the spear to shield them. She gave a bright smile and reassured, "I'm fine." The two stood frozen in place, saying nothing. A trap, and they used Erica as bait. Before Will could recover, Ren stepped directly in front of him and shouted, "Hey, more of them are coming." A sharp spear was flying fast toward them. The two immediately took up defensive stances, furious, and yelled, "We're surrounded." The monsters charged forward in a frenzy. At that moment, Marie also quickly struggled up out of the pit mouth. Will's gaze was now cold and terrifying. He lowered his voice and said, "We're surrounded." The monsters kept coming closer, showing no fear. Will frowned and cursed inwardly, how cunning, they're hunting humans. This is exactly like the monster transformation after a red moon. No, the red moon shouldn't appear for another 2 years. Could that tragedy already be starting? Erica, bound, suddenly gave a low, uncomfortable groan. He turned his head and was surprised, thinking silently, "She's still alive." "There's no time to think about this. I gain strength to fight for moments like this." Marie gripped the greatsword in her hand, feeling a pang as she thought, so many of them. Lucky she's alive, but Will jumped down shouting, "Leave it to me," combining plant control with what I've learned. He opened his mouth and shouted an order, "Manifest yourself." The monsters, unwilling to yield, responded with a roar. Will looked back, saw her anxious demeanor, and said bluntly, "Marie, you don't need to be on the front line. Being behind the melee unit makes it easier to exploit openings." She heard this and replied quickly, "Copy that. More importantly, charge your energy accurately." Her whole body lit up brilliantly. Her feet suddenly froze as if unable to believe what she was witnessing. Then unleash a wide area attack to break their formation. Marie didn't stand still either and declared, "Watch my full power strike." Suddenly someone from behind attempted a sneak attack. But suddenly with a single sword stroke, Will quickly took him down. A voice rang out, "I'll cover you, don't let any get through." That one was left right behind her, sprawled on the grass. Ren from afar praised them without restraint. "Well done, you two, I'll rescue her." Will sprinted off, replying loudly, "Count on you, master." Suddenly he turned his head, a chill surged up this bad feeling. His pupils immediately dilated. The red moon's influence makes them ferocious. Ren quickly ran toward Erica. He stepped briskly, not noticing that the ground beneath was changing. A tall silhouette rose up to block the view, showing that the monsters were coordinating. It was an orc hiding underground. "Not good, the distance is too far, I won't make it in time." It raised its hand and swung a fist at Ren. "In a previous life it was like this too. Master never abandoned the wounded. From now on I'll be the greatest healer in the world." He witnessed that scene and gritted his teeth. No matter how excellent a healer is, living like that means it'll take many lifetimes to fix things. The fist came close, a helpless voice called out, "Master." Ren also paused for a moment, said nothing. The monster reached forward powerfully, moving with more majesty than ever. He smiled faintly and lowered his voice to ask, "Wait, what's going on here? Was that a physical buff just now? Did Master use healing magic to attack?" The monster used bloodshot, sharp eyes to try to brutally eliminate targets around it. It swung its hands wildly at Ren. Luckily, he nimbly dodged. Ren's feet sprang off the ground, leaving specks of dirt on his cloth shoes. He dashed around behind the monster and used a stealth strike. Ren lightly touched the back of its neck and said farewell in a calm voice. then sleep well. A beam of blue light shot through the back of the monster's neck and frightened it. It immediately sensed danger from behind, frowned and whimpered. With a single quick stealth move, Ren quickly felled the monster, making it sprawl onto the lush grass. Will rushed up to Ren, shouting, "Master, that move just now." He didn't explain much, only answered in a low voice, something like that. A good teacher can also learn from his own disciple, though I just came up with it too. Will and Marie beamed and praised non-stop. He said as expected of Master, and Marie quickly added, "That was so cool." Ren untied Erica, regained his initial composure, then ordered, "All right, retreat while we still can." Will glanced over with a gloomy expression. The monsters were still struggling among themselves. He lowered his voice and asked, with Master's strength, couldn't he wipe them out? Ren sighed helplessly and explained, "Idiot, I only put the orc to sleep. I'm a healer, even if it's a monster, I have no intention of harming it. When it wakes, it'll feel better." Will ran behind him, watching his retreating figure. The corner of his mouth lifted into a slight smile. "Indeed, Master. We broke the goblins' encirclement. After taking down a few pursuers, it seemed they'd given up. The four stopped in an open spot. Ren said this should be a place to rest a bit." Ren reached out, trying to heal Erica. He murmured, "Hey kid, wake up." She suddenly opened her eyes wide in surprise. Erica sat up. The first thing she asked was, "Where is this?" Marie immediately reassured her, "You're safe." Will put a hand respectfully and asked politely, "Sorry to ask as you wake, but what happened? Why were you alone?" Erica showed a flash of panic, clutching her head and asking fearfully, "Alone? Yesterday's expedition went very smoothly. I didn't hold anyone back. But whenever I let my guard down, bad things happen. This morning when I woke up, Professor Veronica was gone." Will suddenly repeated the name Professor Veronica. Erica recounted everything. She left a note saying to await orders but didn't say when she'd return, so I was very worried. While discussing with the other two, somehow I ended up going to look for her. His face darkened as he looked her over suspiciously. "They persuaded you and you couldn't refuse, right?" He thought, typical Erica, but this can't be taken lightly. One wrong step and someone could die. None of us are prepared enough to face situations far different from class or drills. Erica didn't answer, just continued anxiously. "After entering the forest, I smelled a sweet scent, and when I woke up it was already this time." Ren buried his head in his hands helplessly and blurted out, "So the goblins used a sedative, the earlier trap in their cooperation with the orc. What on earth is going on?" "No, now's not the time to mull that over. Anyway, your base is nearby. Let's rendezvous with the other two." The four of them lined up and moved off quickly. Erica, walking ahead, suddenly halted and lowered her voice. "Over here, wait." She looked up, a hint of panic on her face. Looking at the wreckage before them, she said flatly, "The base has been destroyed." Marie suddenly spoke up, "I've been looking into this already. Goblins are highly territorial, meaning they normally won't leave their domain. So a base placed outside their territory should have been safe, yet it's like this. Why?" Will pondered for a long time. Proactively attacking humans is also a trait of monsters after a red moon, which can't be explained right now. Ren crouched low to scout the surroundings and then spoke up. "There's no sign of fighting either. It seems the two of them ran off somewhere. We'll split up, I'll go find those two. You three rendezvous with Turf and leave the forest. Don't assume your base is safe. Stay alert." The quick reply came. "Roger, understood." We hurried back to our base. Will shoved the door open and called loudly, "Turf, are you okay?" Turf, who was cooking, froze at the noise and then asked in turn, "You're back. Lunch isn't finished yet." Marie finally breathed a sigh of relief. "Thank goodness you're safe." Turf still didn't understand and asked, "What's going on?" Will turned and walked away with Erica, calling back, "We'll explain later, we must leave now, right?" He froze for a moment, eyes widening. The two of them were briefly stunned by the sight before them. He murmured, "It seems we've been being watched." Erica gaped in shock and shouted, What do we do? What do we do?" In response to that surprise, Will said, "I've been thinking about how weak I've been." Erica froze as if catching his meaning and asked, "You mean?" He turned, the corner of his mouth twitching up, and said softly, "Take it down, the three of us together. I believe we can win." The monsters still stood there, towering and terrifyingly resolute. We'll watch the monsters carefully. Facing this large pack, coordination among the three of us is a matter of survival. He reminded his teammates, "Marie, don't rush forward like before, just use your strikes to support the vanguard." No sooner said than done. Will acted at once. "Let the wood golem take the vanguard position." He kept issuing the best tactics. Erica should use fire to halt the goblins' advance. But Erica felt deeply insecure. How could someone like me be taken so easily? Still, Will smiled to encourage her. "It's fine, your fire will be very useful." Recognized, Erica couldn't help but be surprised. She was still worried and trying to regain her composure. Not wanting to let Will down, Erica summoned all her strength to cast fire magic. In an instant, the goblins were surrounded by flames. Fearing being burned alive, they began to fall back one by one. Erica shouted happily, "I did it." But Will barely had time to relax before he noticed something odd. "Great, we won't be overwhelmed by a giant wave of goblins all at once now." From the flames, a solid leg stepped out slowly. Its rippling muscles forced the flames to withdraw. It was an orc. It strode out arrogantly, deliberately challenging them. Will was somewhat surprised. It turned out to be on a completely different level from the goblins. With that thought, he ordered the wood golem to charge. At the same time, he directed Erica to coordinate rhythmically. "Erica, fire." She accepted the order quickly, got it. The golem's body became wreathed in flames and it lunged at the orc. The fire spread onto the orc's body, making him convulse in pain and seizing the moment, Will called for help. Marie. Marie caught the opportunity quickly. "I've got it." She swung her sword with force, sending him flying. He tumbled and sprawled on the ground. Marie happily slapped Erica's hand in celebration. Great team. Will still didn't dare relax. The coordination was certainly good, but what troubled him was that the orc kept getting back up, as if that wasn't enough. Will was clear-headed enough to recognize its strength, a regenerative ability. Marie began to worry. Do we have to keep doing this until it can no longer revive? Will didn't rush, he pondered. Is its regeneration limited? There's no guarantee we can defeat it by repeating attacks like this. If we intend to finish it, we need a more reliable method. But then Erica screamed in alarm, snapping him back to reality. Something's coming. Will stood alone against a powerful energy barreling toward them. But when he slowly opened his eyes, what faced him was a blade. Indeed, a fiend was attacking him, the goblins. From farther off, you could see the orc holding them in his hand, preparing to throw them. Will didn't waste words and sent that fiend to the afterlife. Damn it, annoying snipers. Erica deftly spotted another fiend swooping down from above. They're appearing again. Marie charged up and kicked them clean out of the sky. She seemed to have a plan of her own. I'll send them back where they came from. With that, Marie sent the fiend flying far away. This was when she showed her reliability. Sir Will, you look like you've thought of something, so let me handle it from here. Hearing that, Will acted with confidence. I'm counting on you. He put full trust in his teammates, using Erica and the wood golem's area attacks to halt the hordes of goblins. Marie would return the thrown weapons. With nothing else to worry about, Will charged into melee with the orc. Now I just have to deal with this orc. It quickly noticed his presence, but Will was a step faster and evaded the attack. From afar, the battlefield was shrouded in dust and smoke. The orc kept missing its strikes and instead took a hit to the groin from Will. This enraged it further, teeth grinding viciously. The orc roared angrily, the sound echoing through the forest. The chest wound Will struck moments before knitted itself shut. Even the slashed wrist had quickly healed, only to find that Will was behind it before anyone knew it. You're careless now. He unleashed magic from directly behind it. This is the finishing blow. Will didn't hesitate to use magic to defeat it in one strike, amplifying the life force. The orc's heart suddenly began to ache sharply. Its whole body trembled as it weakly moaned. Its eyes rolled back and tears welled up. The scene turned grisly, blood spraying everywhere. The outcome was obvious at a glance. Will broke into a triumphant smile. The battle ended and the orc collapsed onto the grass. At last he could exhale. By forcing the orc's regeneration to overwork, the surge of vitality made its body explode. It couldn't regenerate from that. Then he turned and proudly declared, now the only thing left is to wipe out the remaining goblins. After his proclamation, one by one the monsters were sent to their eternal rest. Heads and limbs lay scattered on the ground. The final battle was over. Before them lay a battlefield piled with monster corpses. Will could finally relax his whole body in this state. Erica, having been fighting all this time, was exhausted. Only Marie remained energetic, rushing over cheerfully. We've totally won, right? Will didn't spare praise for the girls. Everyone's coordination was great. Erica still looked frightened, but thankfully we managed. But Will remained uneasy. It wasn't over yet. Others were still. At another location in the forest, a raging tornado was sweeping everything away. Will's group also witnessed it, and he immediately recognized it as Sirius. Thinking that Will led the way, if we head toward that vortex, we should be able to regroup with the other teams. At the same time, Sirius was rebalancing his magic. A call suddenly made him look over. Sirius, are you alright? Seeing Will's group intact, Sirius breathed easier, glad everyone was okay. Not far from them, someone stomping on a pile of monsters called out, hey. It was Bode. He looked puzzled. Something about this formation felt off. Where are Professor and the others? At that moment, Ren appeared from who knows where and replied, we're here. Seeing him, Will hurried over. Master, we've found 2 people, Ren explained. Consider it done. Then a vortex rose, so we headed that way. He patted Will's shoulder with satisfaction. Everyone did well. I trusted you all and I'm glad no one was hurt. The group received the praise and beamed with smiles. Bode chimed in with a reminder. The mood's like it's all over, but we're still missing someone. Hearing that, Will scanned again. Right, Professor Veronica. Bode remained uneasy. I'm not overly worried about her, but we can't just leave without saying anything. Ren immediately proposed a plan. We'll watch the remaining students. Anyone who can fend for themselves splits off to search. He seemed agreed. Yes, Sirius. The next assigned pair was Will. Go find them. The 2 of you go search. The 2 men obeyed at once. Yes, understood. A while later, Will set off to find the missing. I'll enhance my hearing to sense living presences. Suddenly, a sound rang in his ear, but he wasn't practiced enough to distinguish it, so he had to search manually. Looking toward the sound, he saw Veronica's back. Found you good. She seemed safe. Will quickly called out, Professor Veronica. In her hand, she was holding a glowing red stone. Veronica heard the voice and slowly turned her head. The moment he saw it, Will's face darkened. The light, could it be like the red moon? She quickly tucked the stone into her pocket. Veronica frowned and asked Will, what are you doing here? He hadn't fully collected himself yet. Then he remembered the main issue. I'm looking for the professors. The monsters went berserk, so the field training probably ended. Strangely, she passed by coldly. Is that so? Then let's go back. Sensing something off, Will immediately called back. Wait. He asked bluntly, what was that stone just now? But Veronica brushed it off. It's nothing. Will pressed on. You say it's nothing, and what have you been doing all this time? Abandoning the students like that. The more he questioned, the more anxious he became, his body beginning to tremble. Please answer me. Veronica froze at his words. She spoke in a low, deadly tone. Sorry, but it seems I have no other choice. Veronica's eyes held a clear threat. It'd be better if you kept quiet about this. Even Will didn't know how things had turned out this way. But in the end she turned and walked away without acting. Don't worry, I won't do anything bad. After that I couldn't say anything more to Professor Veronica. Even if I wanted to press her further, I didn't have the authority. More importantly, I'm not ready to doubt Professor Veronica, my comrade from a previous life, and thus the field training ended. The next day, since returning from the training, Will still felt unsettled. He barely slept last night. This means Professor Veronica is connected to the Red Moon event, but in my previous life. Lost in thought, he saw something up ahead. Two people were speaking mysteriously in front of the gate. The person was none other than the one he had been thinking about, Professor Veronica. He quickly dampened his mana and concealed his will pressed into a corner by the wall and enabled eavesdropping. He couldn't be discovered. The man facing Veronica asked in a low voice, "Yes, I've received your request to leave the academy. Where do you intend to go?" But she replied curtly, "Personal matters." Will's mind raced. Her personal matter outside the academy likely involved that redstone. Resolving to follow her, he decided he had no choice but to tail her. Veronica left the academy shortly after. From behind, Will officially began to shadow her. Will felt he was acting too hastily, following her without thinking. Lost in thought, in the blink of an eye, Veronica's figure was gone. If I'm wrong, then I'm truly a stalker. Memories from his previous life surged back. Will couldn't obsess over being misunderstood, especially with a chance to uncover that tragedy. He vowed to clear Veronica's name. Something unfamiliar made Will look around. After all, this was his first return here since his past life. After I graduated from the Healing Academy, monsters ran rampant and I was sent to battlefields everywhere. I'm fairly sure I passed through this town back then. As he thought that, he stopped and watched Veronica, if I remember correctly. It turned out she was just buying bread at a small bakery. Memories from his past life returned. Then Will was holding a loaf of bread in his hands. He looked at it with delight. Honey bread. Without hesitation, Will tasted it. This exquisite treat lit up his eyes. So good. Veronica agreed, this place is famous. Will used the chance to make small talk. I'm from the countryside, so I rarely buy treats like this. You grew up in a merchant family in the city, so you must eat this often, right? Veronica replied calmly, yes, but not entirely because of my background. It's my rule that whenever I see a bakery I must stop in. This made Will more curious, a rule. Veronica dropped her guard and slowly recounted her life. From trading trips with her parents, to coming of age and charging across battlefields, I met many people. Her gaze grew oddly thoughtful. I almost never met anyone a second time, and if I did they had changed so much they were like different people. For that reason, Veronica set a personal rule. I don't want to regret when that happens, so I forbid myself from ever saying later. So Will no longer felt the need to hold back and blurted it out. That explains it. No wonder you speak so bluntly, it scares people. The remark surprised her. I didn't expect you to think of me that way. Then Veronica changed the subject. Besides, I don't know when I'll die. Will didn't like that and said, don't talk so pessimistically. But she candidly denied his concern. I'm not pessimistic or planning to die. I'm just living fully for the present. Suddenly her tone softened. She looked at him expectantly. If so, will you protect me? Will from my previous life didn't hesitate to answer. All right, I promise. Back in the present, thinking about it made his chest ache a little. He stood in the street tormenting himself. After all, I still let Veronica die. This time I swear I'll protect her. The more he thought, the more determined Will became, and to do that he needed to uncover the truth with his own eyes. So Will trailed Veronica even more closely. She began to enter a hidden corner behind the building. Seeing her stand before a large iron gate made Will more suspicious. Something about it looked off. He worried relentlessly. Will she be okay, Veronica? I need to improve my stealth skill to hide my presence. After a while, Veronica stepped inside. Of course, Will couldn't stay out. He hid at a corner of the wall and heard another voice. We're waiting for you. A person in a black cloak stood before her. Sorry to summon you to a place like this, but it's important. The figure removed the hood to reveal purple hair. It was all root. She wore a scheming expression. Now about the item we discussed. Veronica remained silent, watching her opponent. After a moment, she produced the red stone, astonishing all root. This is. She quickly grabbed the stone, but a moment later she frowned slightly. Allroot raised the stone with glee. Marvelous. Then she turned to flatter. You're truly talented. Yes, of course, I've always believed so. Perhaps Will began to hear the information he'd been seeking. With this, the greatest wish of our church. Allroot couldn't help revealing the plan. We're one step closer to the Red Moon. Those words turned Will's face dark. He immediately pieced together the whole affair. Of course, this really involves the Red Moon and this church too. Of all bad luck, the skill Will used began running out of time. Veronica sensed something amiss in the next instant. Only then did he realize, damn, his concealment skill had worn off. Without thinking, Veronica lunged at him with her sword. Will was defenseless now, eyes wide with fear. Terrified, he could only shout, Professor Veronica. She trembled violently as she braced her body in front of him. So you did follow me after all. The dragon before them grew increasingly ferocious. At that moment, footsteps came from afar. I told you, didn't I, that you must come alone? Allroot held the stone, sounding regretful. I'm disappointed you broke our agreement. I truly thought our cult was about to gain another member. Hearing that, Veronica coldly swung her sword in a slash. For the record, this was unintended. That attitude made her hurriedly appease. Oh my, I was too quick to judge. If so, just eliminate that witness and the cult will gladly welcome you. Will was startled by that remark. Instead, Veronica pointed her sword forward and replied bluntly, I refuse. I came here only to investigate. Alrut narrowed her eyes and appraised her. I have no intention of sacrificing my valuable disciple. Seeing the tension, he hurriedly stood up. Professor Veronica, I'm sorry, but I need to know what's going on. Veronica immediately turned back and cut in. It's my fault for not explaining sooner. That day, I sensed something unusual in the forest. What I found there was a monster gone berserk. A cold flash lit her eyes. Before her, beneath the grass, lay a red stone. Veronica picked it up then, this stone, this feeling. She clenched her fist and poured a source of mana into it. When I infused magic into it, it emitted a red light. Then Alrut, as if having waited long, stepped forward. Unexpectedly, I found a potential fellow believer in a place like this. She pressed her hands together in a prayerful gesture. This must be guidance from above and proof of the mission I've been given. Seeing that, Veronica became immediately wary. Who are you? Alrut smiled and closed the distance. I would love to tell you many things, but we have rules. She raised a finger and lowered her voice to warn, if you want to learn about that stone and about us, there are 2 conditions. Before Veronica could speak, the other rambled on. First, you must make it glow again to verify your qualifications. Second, you must tell no one and come to the designated place alone to prove your trustworthiness. Alrut put a hand to her chest in feigned contrition. I'm sorry to test you like this. Veronica kept her eyes on her, but I truly hope you'll become one of our followers. Back in the present, she bluntly refused the offer, so I plan to infiltrate them to investigate covertly. Recalling how I spoke to Will earlier, I thought I'd made it clear I wouldn't let anything happen. But she had coldly turned and left. It's fine, I said I wouldn't let anything bad happen. He trembled slightly behind her at that. That's still not enough explanation, Veronica added softly, you're right, sorry. Finally, Will breathed a sigh of relief. But I'm only glad you're not a bad person, Professor Veronica. Alrut across from them calmly interjected. So your desire to join the cult was a lie. Now I'm even more disappointed. As soon as she finished speaking, she dropped the stone from her hand. The water's surface made a sound, accompanied by a tone of regret. I didn't expect I'd have to eliminate such a talented person. Immediately we'll sense something amiss. The stone you received from Professor Veronica, you threw it into the water. The stone suddenly flashed red. From the deep, the Octodorako began to awaken. Even the surrounding beasts seemed to be controlled by something. The water churned violently. A slew of monsters roared up from below. Alrut quietly backed away, then clapped and shouted with excitement. Marvelous, even within the cult, those capable of granting such feral power are rare. The sight of the beasts left Will stunned. Aquatic dragon, is it really this strong? Veronica carefully counted 1, 2, 3, 8 in total. Hearing that, he immediately cut in, I'll handle half of them. She flatly refused and lunged forward. No. Veronica tightened her grip on the sword, not necessary. Mana flowed from the sword as Veronica spun and swung. The spectral blade whirlwind assault. A flurry of razor-sharp slashes from the blade cut straight at the aquatic dragon. Will was frozen in fear at the sight. No wonder she's Professor Veronica. At that moment, a cold glint flashed in Veronica's eyes. The torso of one aquatic dragon collapsed to the ground. Seeing that, she sprang back and dodged quickly. Will rushed over anxiously and asked, are you okay? Veronica steadied her breath and answered, I'm fine. Looking at the twitching body, she was briefly stunned. Impossible, it took that full strike and it's still alive. No matter how strong its regeneration, how could it not die instantly after being decapitated? Heads very quickly grew back, terrifying them both, and it even regenerated from there. No healing magic could do that. Will drew his dagger, preparing to fight. Something's wrong, could it be? An aquatic dragon suddenly lunged at him. It plunged its head into the ground. Will quickly dodged. He spun and swung the dagger in his hand. The slash abruptly stopped at the creature's flesh layer. Will trembled, trying to pull the blade free. This limp body, I knew it. He immediately wrapped his arms around its body. Then he shouted a warning, Professor Veronica, I have a trick I want to try, please step back. Veronica said little and retreated. Understood, but don't overdo it. Will activated his physical enhancement, releasing his limits. He called out just a little harder. His feet dug into the ground. His fingers dug into the aquatic dragon's scales. Then Will heaved it up, revealing a massive Octodorako. Come out, hurry, hurry. Only then did Veronica fully see it, so that's what it was. I thought it had been decapitated and still not died. The sight of the Octodorako made her shudder. Turns out that wasn't a head but a leg. The giant that had appeared was the soft-bodied monster Octodorako. The familiar sound of footsteps came again, so you saw through that dragon's true form in an instant. Alrut put a hand to her chest and sighed, wonderful. No, not wonderful at all. Then she shouted loudly, the sect doesn't seek combat ability. If we can't eliminate you here, it'll be troublesome. After that, Alrut slowly produced an item. At this rate, I'll be acting against the sect's wishes. The mysterious sect member Alrut took out a staff and declared, therefore I, Alrut, will take permission to handle this matter myself. Will seem to have planned ahead. Professor Veronica, could you deal with that monster for me? Recalling her earlier moves, he explained, your spectral sword will deal with that soft body more effectively than my method. Veronica still looked uneasy. She agreed, but she couldn't let her student be in danger. Will suddenly grabbed her hand. Power from his body quickly flowed through, fortifying her physique. When finished, he smiled and said, after I take it down, I'll be right back. Veronica blinked at the instruction, be careful until then. The corner of her mouth twitched into a smile as she murmured, I've got a bold student. Immediately, Veronica advanced with her sword. Fine, but you must be careful about one thing. She glanced back and whispered something small, that one might be. Will's eyes widened in shock. No way. Hearing that, Veronica reminded him, you proved it's not impossible yourself. He understood and immediately ran off. Got it. Alroot remained composed where she stood. That was fast. The corner of her mouth curled into a smug smile. Then I shall. At that moment Will prepared to swing his knife. Alroot effortlessly blocked the attack immediately. He was briefly stunned inwardly. She blocked it. Seeing him wildly slashing, Alroot showed excitement. Looks like you have great talent too. Her gaze flicked to the side. Then both temporarily paused their attacks. Alroot touched the cut on her face. It just grazed me. Her finger traced the fresh blood lightly. It hurts so. A stream of power flowed from her fingertip. Let me heal myself. At that moment Veronica stepped forward. That stone carried passive mana waves identical to offensive magic. I used the inverse method, in other words she is. Seeing the wound knit, she immediately realized, like you, a battle-capable healer. That information stunned Will for a moment. Combat by healing magic, did you come up with that yourself? Alroot raised her head and explained, of course not, how could I invent such things? The staff in her hand glowed, yet even someone like me. Alroot swung her hand and the ground immediately exploded. This is possible thanks to the sect's teaching. Will's eyes fixed on the staff, so it existed back then, the combat techniques for healers. Recalling his past self's guilt, he should have fought himself. Will trembled and gripped his knife hilt. How far have they come? In front of him, Alroot continued. On that point it seems you were born with the talent. I'm rather jealous. Thinking of a mysterious person, she chuckled through her teeth. I very much want you to meet him. Saying this, Alroot grew excited and asked, what do you think? Are you interested in the sect? Will cut in angrily. You must be joking. He clenched his fist and said in a low voice, I will never become your ally. Will's eyes suddenly flashed red. Never, not even in another life. A streak of light flashed before Alroot's eyes. Energy from her body began to surge out. What a pity. As she finished speaking, she sprang forward. Alroot swung the staff with a twisted smile. Then I will have to destroy you after all. Will gritted his teeth and absorbed the sudden blow. He trembled as he resisted the opponent's powerful strike. Physical enhancement when used is quite forceful. Will thought of their mysterious demeanor and the red stone earlier, a heretical. The bodies and energies of the two were in opposing states. His pupils flashed. Healing magic and offensive magic. There are so many things I don't understand. Alroot before him was still crazed for battle, but I only need to interrogate her about everything to finish this. He gritted his teeth and shoved the opponent away with force. An unexpected surge of power helped Will fling her aside. Then maybe I can avoid that tragedy. Seizing the chance, he spun quickly. Will delivered a kick straight into Alroot's body. She was unexpectedly countered and thrown back. Yet she still grinned with excitement. At this rate it seems I might lose. Then Alroot suddenly raised her staff high, but I have the sect backing me. The red stone immediately pulsed light, enhancing her physique. Alroot's pupils instantly turned red. One of her arms swelled huge with power. Blue veins began to bulge along her cheekbones. Though transformed, Alroot howled in delight. Wonderful. Will already felt something was wrong. This clearly exceeded the normal physical enhancement of healing magic, and he loudly demanded, who taught you that magic? Hearing this, Alroot respectfully placed a hand to her chest. It was all thanks to the teachings of the heretical sect. Remembering then she had stood bewildered among the crowd. Until that time, I lived recklessly without caring for anything. Alroot fumbled as she healed, cursing. I was hired by a magic team to be a healer, just following the orders of some arrogant man. Those days were dull. Saying that, she gave a self-mocking laugh. If you were a healer too, one day you'll understand. The other's words made him think of the Alps crowd, that this world is full of people unworthy of salvation. The red stone was then given to her. The sect granted me power and enlightenment. The more she spoke, the more excited Alroot became. Since then, my life began to shine. Will gripped his dagger tightly and retorted, I don't know what you've realized, but what you're doing is wrong. Then he couldn't help shouting, at this rate many people will die. Alroot waved to block the attack. She remained calm, but it doesn't matter. As she closed the distance, she whispered, because the sect says it's right. Immediately after, Alroot swept her hand and sent him flying toward the wall. A mouthful of blood burst from Will's lips. She then stepped forward slowly, mocking that justice has prevailed. Will bowed his head in silence, not answering just because of such an empty person. In his mind, he suddenly thought of loved ones, his master, Miss Veronica, and all the others who had died at her hands. Will clenched his teeth in unwillingness. Seeing this, Alroot's expression momentarily froze. He hugged his injured arm and slowly rose, surprising her. You can still stand. Alroot's eyes widened in horror, but with all those injuries, a stream of energy gradually gathered around his arm. The wounds on it healed instantly. Alroot couldn't help but ask, did you heal that wound instantly? What kind of restorative power is that? Will clutched his head and said in a low voice, I will not forgive you. He swept his hair back to reveal sharp eyes. I will make you pay with pain worse than death. Enraged, Alroot lunged forward. This time I'll kill you outright so you won't have a chance to recover. Will swung his fist with terrifying force, the oppressive power making the whole space tremble. Alroot briefly couldn't withstand the blow. A smirk on his lips, Will taunted, already screaming at just that. He spun and threw another punch. I'm not done with you yet. Alroot's eyes widened in obvious terror, too fast. Instantly, she took a punch from him. Bright red blood poured from her nose and mouth. Alroot was punched meters away. Then she lay motionless on the ground. Seeing that, Will slowly approached. Passed out already, we'll deal with you later. He then suddenly remembered, all right, Miss Veronica. Before them, Veronica was fighting in Octodorako. Her eyes flashed with a cold light. With a single sword stroke, she severed one of the beast's tentacles. A powerful energy radiated out. Veronica slowly sheathed her sword. Immediately, the sliced flesh pieces fell away. She smiled and turned to him, done over there too. Veronica glanced into the distance and continued, that one has strong regeneration, so it took some time. Will understood inwardly, so the monster was a tougher opponent after all. No wonder it's Veronica. He slowly turned his head, so then. They both approached. Will lightly tapped Allroot's face. As soon as she opened her eyes, she met Will's bright smile. Now tell us everything. Will pressed Allroot down hard, causing her pain. Before she could recover, a sharp blade was pressed to her throat. Stubborn even when about to be buried, she snarled, "Don't make that scary face." Will replied coldly, "That depends on you." He bluntly interrogated, "I have a lot to ask. What is this cult? What is its goal?" Allroot answered vaguely, "A follower may not disclose information to outsiders." To his surprise, she suddenly grabbed the knife and began spouting crazed words, "Always offer your life to the cult." Then, as if mad, she slashed her own throat. Long live the cult. Her suicide left Will stunned, unable to believe his eyes. Allroot's eyes rolled after the recent pain. In the eternal realm, she still carried an obsession. "I take my life to protect the cult's secrets. A perfect follower, thus my soul will be led to the world Lord Claudio's desires." As she departed, Allroot still wore a satisfied smile. But suddenly Allroot slowly woke up. Her mind felt strangely clear. "She can't even die in peace. My wound has disappeared." Allroot felt increasingly strange. She clearly stabbed her own throat. The cold blade cutting into her neck and the hot blood gushing out felt real. Unexpectedly, Will also insisted she had killed herself. "I was surprised you took your own life. I underestimated your fate." He laughed provocatively, "But I already healed you." Allroot couldn't believe it and kept denying it. "That's impossible. I should have died almost immediately." Will didn't hesitate to explain. "If it's almost, that means not instantly dead. I can heal that." Allroot refused to accept it. That would be impossible for a normal healer. Then he put her in her place. "I'm not normal. One day I'll become the best healer in the world." Will continued his interrogation. "Do you realize, if I can heal someone on the brink of death, I can torment you up to the edge of death?" Hearing that, Allroot fell silent. Realizing the seriousness, her eyes began to panic. Will pressed his advantage, a malicious smile spreading. "Well, are you ready to confess?" Fear was written across Allroot's face. No way. At this rate, she had no choice but to reveal things. But in the next second, her pupils contracted as if hypnotized. She was drawn into a mysterious space, voices urging in her ear, "Dive for it." Allroot's face showed sheer terror. Suddenly, tears streamed down her face. Will's expression immediately changed. Allroot trembled in agony, her eyes rolling back. Veronica quickly sensed something was wrong. "Back away, Will, something's off." Will quickly released her and stepped back. In an instant, her head and limbs vaporized. The two standing there gaped in shock. Looking closely at the ground, Allroot had become a desiccated corpse. Will ran over. "What the?" He immediately tried to heal her. "Wait, don't die." Seeing his efforts, Veronica could only feel helpless. "It's useless." Will stopped and began analyzing. Her life force vanished in the blink of an eye, some kind of curse and an extremely powerful one. Will still had many questions. Who was behind this man? Veronica asked him, "Will, are you okay?" He replied with some regret, "I'm fine, but this guy." Only then did he feel guilty. This was a chance to extract information. "It's my fault for letting you come, sorry." But she was generous and didn't hold it against him. "As long as the students are safe, that's enough." Veronica smiled gently and said, "Let's return to the academy." On the way back, Will kept muttering, "The red stone was destroyed. In the end, we learned nothing." Veronica remained calm and explained in turn. "The cult's red stone made the monsters savage. Just knowing these things exist is a gain. You can't guard against things you don't even know exist." Of course, he had similar suspicions. She's right. Compared to my previous life, I'm definitely making progress. At this rate, surely. Even so, Will still had too many unresolved questions. Taking the chance, Veronica confided, "Honestly, I'm really glad I joined the field training." She revealed another secret. "I actually insisted on coming because I was worried about you. Our academy is the only one with 2 instructors accompanying students, right?" At last, some of Will's doubts were partially cleared. "So that's it." Veronica only became aware of that thing in this life. He kept asking, "I've always wanted to ask, how did you come up with using static mana to attack?" Veronica answered honestly. She came from a merchant family and likely had many opportunities to encounter both healers and battle mages. But his thinking was a bit different. "If it only took that to invent it, I feel magical research should have advanced far more." Veronica was surprised. "Really? Then I don't know either." Suddenly, Veronica recalled something important, but she vaguely sensed familiarity. She felt as if someone had told her something similar when she was a child. While Will was still pondering, they arrived in front of the bakery. Could that person be connected to the cult? Veronica wanted to pop in again. "Will, let's put the complicated stuff aside. Do you want to buy some bread?" Will's spirit felt pulled back by the question. He nodded happily and said, "Yes, please." And so the big mysteries remained. I gained new power to avoid destruction. I was scolded for going out without permission. Elsewhere in a room, the atmosphere was eerily silent. Ulp sat neatly at the table but seemed dead. There were still snake-bite marks on his neck. And then another voice spoke. "The diligent one is dead, and now it comes to me. The girl carries a snake with her, mouth constantly agreeing, 'I'll do it, I'll do it.'" She held the red stone in her hand, staring at it entranced, as if it were an order from the cult. A few days had passed since the battle with the sect. At this time, Will and Veronica were sparring. He kept asking about the previous information. "Did you find anything about the sect?" She quickly replied, "Not much called a sect, but it seems they showed no notable activity." Will expressed regret, I wish I could go into town to gather intel. She showed her strictness. Students need a permit to leave the academy. Veronica reiterated that a student's duty is to study. Will smiled confidently, I know, but I hate sitting idle, so I came up with an idea. As he spoke, he suddenly focused all his force into the balls of his feet, then accelerated and avoided Veronica's strike. Without her noticing, Will closed in from behind. I planned to seek out Master Shedderl, the foremost monster expert. Thinking it would be easy, he was instead effortlessly blocked by Veronica. So that's it, you intended to use the off-campus program, but she stuck to her view. I'm pretty sure you need excellent theory grades to register. As she spoke, she swung her sword, forcing Will to struggle to defend. Are you even qualified? He confidently tossed her backward. Don't worry about it. Will began to boast. This time I ranked first in theory for the whole class. Hearing that, Veronica sheathed her sword and breathed a sigh of relief. Having an outstanding student like you makes me proud, and you're becoming more reliable, aren't you? But he still recognized he needed to know his limits. I still have a long way to go, but I've begun to realize how much you've been holding back, and that's good. Just then Veronica offered a reward. It's time for you to choose your core. He was still clueless. Core. She analyzed seriously. You have the creativity to flexibly turn healing magic into attacks, but if you find a specialty and hone it, your combat style will stabilize and the variety in your options will shine even. But Will answered thoughtlessly, then I'll choose Professor Veronica. Veronica emphasized again, what I can teach you is sword magic. Are you really okay with that? No need to rush your decision. Then she quickly proposed, for now we should go meet Master Shedderl. Will finally understood, I get it. After that he began his journey. He had an appointment with Master Shedderl, and the weather was beautiful despite being far from town. This trip exceeded his expectations, a perfect day for field study. The off-campus program lets students learn from experts outside the academy. At Schwarz, we often visit mages active on the front lines, but you can also experience the most advanced academic fields. Shedderl was a famous monster researcher even in my previous life. His achievements were great enough to earn a royal medal. The more he thought about it, the more Will admired him, a true monster scholar living far from settlements. But his nature was even more curious. I wonder if he's ever been attacked by monsters. Suddenly, Will sensed danger and looked up. From above, a torrent of huge boulders was falling like a landslide. Will quickly brought his mind back to the present. There are dangers like this here too. He ran full force and dodged each boulder. But suddenly one boulder seemed to target him and was hurtling straight at him. Will quickly focused all his mana into his palms, then swung a few cuts, cleaving the rock into many pieces. Afterwards, he calmly regained his composure. But it seemed not over. He continued to sense something rushing toward him. It was a throwing dart. Will managed to catch it successfully. He inspected it carefully. A star-tipped arrow. Just then two others approached. Sorry. The black-haired one gave an unconvincing excuse. A monster trap misfired. Will didn't want to bother with petty men and intended to leave. Trap misfired. I nearly died. Do you know that? But the black-haired one taunted, you're still alive, aren't you? The blonde youth sounded more genial. We're hunters here. People don't usually pass this way. We'll be more careful next time. Will sighed in annoyance and moved on. Learn your lesson. We were in a hurry, so please don't do that. But it turned out to be a cover. The blonde began to reveal his mean nature. I've learned my lesson. The two planned to act maliciously and jump Will's group. Next time we'll make it count. But he calmly bent down, dodged their attack, then glanced over and observed carefully. Seeing things in his favor, he gave the two a kick that sent them straight over the cliff. The two stubborn young men still clung to the cliff to hold on. Will looked at them with disdain. The bracelets and rings clearly didn't fit them. Without thinking much, he casually remarked, obviously stolen goods. Will's voice suddenly went cold as he stepped toward them. Funny enough, I've been thinking about this lately, whether there's an effective way to reform bad people. As he squeezed the blonde's mouth, a new idea occurred to him. So Will glared at them with murderous intent. How about brainwashing them? The blonde's whole body began to tremble. The black-haired one, still more worried about himself but mouthy, butted in, stop it. Will flatly declared and threw him to the ground. I'm not going to stop. His smile now was enough to scare the black-haired one. Not going to stop, I've already given you a chance. Saying that, he turned and covered the man's mouth again. The black-haired man's whole body began to tremble. More importantly, the bag the two carried seemed to be holding a living creature. Skedar tapped his finger lightly on the book cover and said softly, I understand. Will explained that he used restorative magic to enhance his senses and performed a speed-reading technique that flipped the pages so fast it left an afterimage. Skedar stood looking at the pile of books in astonishment. The boy smiled brightly and pointed to his head, saying that although the method left him exhausted, he could recover from that fatigue himself. Skedar put his hand to his face, admitting he had underestimated restorative magic and that a researcher shouldn't cling to old prejudices. Will said it was fine, then eagerly urged the professor to give him the next assignment. Skedar looked straight into the young student's eyes. His face suddenly grew stern. Sleep. The brief instruction from Skedar left Will bewildered. He explained that self-recovery doesn't restore physical stamina. Even if the mind is alert, work performance will still decline. Behind him was a humorous illustration of Will looking utterly exhausted. Will silently admired Skedar's perceptiveness that, with just a few words, he had seen through his condition. Skedar reassured him that there was still time for field work, so there was no rush. They would depart after Will had rested. Cut to the high mountains, the two set off on their journey. Will still hesitated, asking if this was really okay. Will carried the tiny dragon Rare on his shoulder. He named it that simply because it was a rare class monster. Skedar said they couldn't leave it in the lab, and observing the dragon would be a valuable experience for Will. Suddenly he stopped, his eyes lighting up as he spotted their target. Before them stood a massive Capricorn with sweeping horns and sullen yellow eyes. Will recalled the book's information. This is a herbivorous monster that usually lives in high mountains far from human settlements. The professor praised Will's thorough preparation, then asked how it felt to see one in person. The Capricorn radiated an ominous purple aura. He felt it was far more imposing than he had imagined. Skedar nodded in agreement, emphasizing that real-life impressions always mattered most. He explained that the species is usually docile and less provoked, but if it attacks, it becomes an extremely formidable opponent. Skedar reminded Will to always anticipate the worst when dealing with living creatures. Will nodded in agreement. Out of nowhere, Rare became alert. It hissed and began emitting a blue electric aura. The shrill hiss of Rare made Will jump. The Capricorn suddenly went berserk, roaring fiercely amid a blood-red atmosphere thick with killing intent. The sound of hooves striking the ground was harsh, and the mountain seemed to tremble under its weight. The beast charged straight toward the two at a terrifying speed. Skedar remained standing, observing from behind. Will immediately took a defensive stance, determined to stop the attack. He cast plant manipulation, summoning gigantic vines from the ground to coil tightly around the creature. Will smiled confidently as the plan seemed to be working, but his smile vanished when the Capricorn bared its sharp teeth. It seemed unfazed by the massive vines. With mad strength, the monster tossed aside and tore through all of Will's botanical barriers. Will broke into a cold sweat, not expecting its power to far exceed every estimate. Skedar shouted Will's name as the beast closed in dangerously close. With no other option, Will quickly drew his dagger. He lunged like an arrow, driving the dagger straight into the Capricorn's neck as blood sprayed everywhere. The monster screamed in agony, the roar echoing across the valley amid streaks of blue electricity. Will landed after the decisive strike. Blood still hung in the air, creating a dramatic scene. The beast collapsed to the ground with a heavy thud. The battle ended swiftly in silence. Skedar stepped closer to ask if Will was hurt while Rare circled overhead. Will looked at the creature lying there with sadness. He realized it hadn't intended to attack, it had just been terrified of something. He asked if Professor Skedar had seen that too, and had planned to restrain it for that reason. Skedar adjusted his glasses and smiled softly. So you noticed it too. Will lowered his eyes in remorse, thinking that if he had been stronger, he might have handled the situation better. Skedar silently observed his pupil's expression, a pensive look passing over his eyes behind the glasses. He sighed softly, remarking that although Will was very talented, he was carrying too much burden on his young shoulders. Skedar recalled the moment Will had rushed forward to protect him and draw the creature's attention onto himself. At their feet, the Capricorn had been treated by Will and now lay still, breathing evenly and unlikely to wake soon. Will still felt guilty for failing to stop it with vines from the start, but Skedar said that if anyone was to blame, he who only stood and watched shared that guilt. Will was stunned by the unexpected comfort from the usually distant professor. Skedar assured him that there were surely more people willing to help Will than he realized, and advised him not to bear everything alone. Will watched Skedar's retreating figure, wondering just how deeply the professor had seen through him. Although he felt completely seen, strangely Will did not feel uncomfortable. Instead, he felt lighter. Skedar placed a hand on his chin, pondering what exactly Rare and the Capricorn had sensed earlier. Rare nuzzled Will's shoulder and fell asleep, likely exhausted from the tense warning it had just given. In a dim room, a hand held a red mana gem glowing brightly. Beside it, a black snake with bewitching purple eyes coiled. The mysterious woman muttered about the trouble caused by sensitive creatures, revealing that she had only infused a small amount of magic into them as an experiment. She smiled wickedly and threateningly, nomming Skedar as if he were the next target in her dark scheme. The two, Will and Skedar, strolled leisurely along the mountainside. Skedar recounted the trouble they had just had with the Capricorn. Despite the incident, the professor was pleased that the field exercise had gone well, having observed 4 additional monster species. As they walked, Will suddenly froze when he saw a figure ahead. A petite girl stood waiting in front of a house. At the sight of the two, the girl eagerly ran over. She threw herself into Skedar's arms, calling his name affectionately. The girl chattered excitedly about finding something glittering in the river while chasing a field mouse. Skedar adjusted his glasses and listened attentively to the child's tale. He summed it up: the girl had found a pretty stone and wanted to gift it to him. Will stood beside them, puzzled, not knowing who the girl was. Skedar explained that she was a child from a nearby settlement. This is a small village set apart in nature, where people choose a peaceful, quiet life. The girl often drops by to play and helps with trading goods with the settlement. Skedar bent down to look at the girl, and the atmosphere suddenly grew noticeably gentler. He introduced to the girl that Will was his new student, an extremely talented person. The girl curiously looked up at Will for a long while. Then she proudly declared herself the senior, since the teacher had taught her for a long time too. As if remembering something, the girl's eyes suddenly lit up. She dug in her pocket and pulled out an acorn, saying it was a greeting gift for her junior Will. Will unexpectedly took the acorn, while Rare on his shoulder began to act strangely. The girl asked whether the little dragon Rare could eat it. Will held the acorn out in front of Rare to see. Without hesitation, Rare snapped up the acorn in an instant. Curious and delighted, the girl beamed with pleasure that her gift was so enthusiastically received. After a brief commotion, the girl waved goodbye and ran off. Watching her small figure fade away, Will remarked that she was like a little storm, then asked Skedar if he was bad at dealing with children. Skedar smiled and said he liked them very much, since his homeland had many children like that. He slipped his hand into his pocket and took something out. In Skedar's hand was a bright red stone. He mused that children's eyes often see things more clearly than adults. The two returned to the library, and Skedar leafed through ancient tomes about stones that drive monsters mad. He revealed that he'd asked the girl to help find strange stones, and he hadn't expected results so soon. Will curiously asked to borrow the stone for closer examination. It was the first time he had directly held an object containing such unusual mana. He recalled that the activation method was to channel static mana into it, similar to using offensive magic. As Will began to gather mana, the stone immediately reacted and emitted a brilliant red glow. Skedar was startled by the change, while Rare started growling menacingly. Suddenly, Rare lunged forward and snapped up the stone right from Will's hand. The little dragon clenched its jaws around the glowing object. With a crack, the stone shattered beneath Rare's teeth. Will went pale as Rare fell into a bad state, mana rising up and enveloping the little dragon. Fortunately, Rare calmed down and curled up to sleep. Will awkwardly apologized for ruining the precious sample. Skedar did not blame him, but his gaze grew unusually serious. Skedar observed that Will seemed to know more about this stone than he had thought. He fell silent as Will mentioned a mysterious cult behind the events. Skedar announced he needed to go down to the cellar to investigate these clues further. Will was about to speak up to help when his teacher signaled him to stop immediately. While acknowledging Will's talent, Skedar considered it still too early for him to venture into such dark matters. Will was silent for a moment, then quietly nodded in agreement with his teacher's decision. Skedar patted his shoulder in consolation, believing that at Will's rate of development, it wouldn't be long before he could stand in that position. The door slammed shut, leaving Will alone in the vast library room. Looking at the shards of the red stone on the table, Will told himself that coming to this academy had definitely been the right decision. However, he remained troubled, feeling that Professor Skedar was deliberately hiding truly important secrets. Images of a ruined, monster-filled future flashed through Will's mind, and he wondered what he must do to change that outcome. He realized that sitting and worrying was pointless and sprang to his feet to take action. Will decided to review everything he'd learned about the monster species he encountered today. He immediately activated the Enhanced Senses skill to focus fully on reading. Suddenly, Will's gaze hardened as his keen hearing detected a strange sound behind the door. He quietly opened the door, his eyes sharp as he stared into the pitch-black hallway. Standing in the silent academy courtyard at night, Will faced a stranger and coldly asked who he was. A blue magical aura flared on Will's hand as he issued a stern warning. If that person left right now, he would spare them. Will stood there with healing magic coalescing in his hand, setting the condition that if they left silently, he would let it pass. Under the pale moonlight, only the feet of the person opposite stood motionless on the ground. Will slightly furrowed his brow, evidently watching the other's movements very closely. A man was supporting his comrade as they approached. Both looked bedraggled, stumbling and begging for help. On closer look, Will recognized them immediately. They were the men who caused trouble for him yesterday. The brown-haired man panted, his face pale as he explained that his companion had been bitten by a venomous snake, and that he himself had a wound on his neck. He swore he'd turn his life around and begged Will to save him. Will replied curtly, fine. Though he said he wouldn't forgive what they'd done, Will still reached out. He decided to save their lives first. Will began casting a healing spell on the collapsed man. The moment the magic touched him, his eyes rolled back and his face contorted. To Will's shock, a jet-black snake with glowing purple eyes lunged out of the victim's mouth toward him. He startled and stepped back. In an instant, Will drew his short sword and blocked the monstrous snake's fanged throat. With a decisive swing, Will hurled the shadowy creature away, readying himself for battle. The black snake slithered over the blond man's corpse, causing the remaining companion to scream in terror and collapse to the ground. A strange pair of legs appeared and the snake obediently coiled around them. A female voice rang out with sarcasm at Will's successful dodge. She appeared, Alyssa, exquisitely haughty in a purple-black gothic dress. She stroked the snake on her hand and chided it to aim better next time. Alyssa looked at Will and wondered if he might be Skedar, since he looked much younger than the rumors suggested. She propped her chin and sneered, clicking her tongue to say that in any case he looked rather tasty. Will began to sweat. Her gait suggested she wasn't used to fighting, but his instincts told him this was not simple. A dark pressure emanated from Alyssa. Will sensed clearly that she was extremely dangerous. Will pointed his sword at her and demanded her identity. She casually replied that she was about to introduce herself. She introduced herself as Alyssa, a member of the Dark Cult, and said she had come because she needed to meet with him. Alyssa knew Will was a monster researcher. She reached into her chest and pulled something out. It was a blazing red stone. Alyssa held it up before Will and asked if he was interested in it. Will's eyes widened in shock. This was the mysterious red stone he had been investigating. Alyssa explained that with this stone, one could control monsters at will. To prove it, Alyssa channeled mana into the stone. Immediately, a giant shadow snake appeared, coiling threateningly. Not giving the opponent time to act, Will lowered his stance, preparing to strike. He lunged forward and severed the black snakes. Dark ichor splattered as Will's blade swept through. Alyssa showed surprise at Will's power, raising a hand to her mouth in admiration. Will drove his sword into the ground and coldly said that, indeed, he was very interested. With his blade still stained with blood, Will demanded she reveal everything she knew. He wanted to capture her for information. Alice sighed, looking exasperated that Will was such an overly serious type. She turned to the trembling man nearby, reminding him that he should do his part as well. The man panicked, shouting that he had followed orders and now only begged for his life. Alice closed in, placed a finger to her lips for silence, and retorted that she hadn't permitted him to fail. Whatever, Alice said, then a black snake began to slither out from her body. She squeezed the head of the shadow snake, and a purple mana began to envelop it. With a wicked smile, Alice had told the man to accept her curse. The brown-haired man froze as black spots began to appear on his neck. He stammered, not understanding what was happening. Behind him, a gigantic Grim Reaper apparition wielding a scythe emerged from inky smoke, engulfing his body. He began to foam at the mouth, tears and snot streaming as he writhed in unbearable pain. He collapsed to the ground, clutching his neck and screaming miserably. Alice stood behind him, looking down coldly as if watching a diversion. Alice laughed harshly with glee. She savored the victim's agony, proclaiming that this moment was truly the best. Will rushed forward to save the man. He wondered if this was a magic that used snakes as intermediaries and immediately cast a healing spell. The moment his hand touched him, Will's eyes widened in horror. He realized something was terribly wrong on the victim's body. Bright red crack-like marks appeared on the man's neck. Will gasped as he realized it was the venom curse. Sweat poured down. Will paled as he recognized how dire the situation was. Ordinary healing magic was utterly useless against this venom curse. Alice tilted her head and regarded Will with mild disappointment. She realized he was merely a healer, not the Skedar she had assumed. Her purple eyes flashed coldly. Alice began to shift her focus elsewhere. She looked toward the nearby wooden house and guessed that Skedar was inside. Will anxiously followed her gaze. Alice ordered the shadow snakes to attack. A black tabio shot off on command. Will shouted, quickly throwing his short sword at the serpent to stop it from reaching the house. The thrown sword hit its mark, but the shadow snake suddenly vanished into the shadow on the ground. Will stood stunned in disbelief. He hadn't expected these creatures could disappear into darkness so easily. The snake suddenly appeared right by the house door. Will shouted Professor Skedar's name to warn him. At that moment, a radiant golden magic circle manifested beneath the creature's feet. A magical explosion erupted, blasting the shadow snake to pieces. Smoke and dust filled the area. From the smoke and the falling remains of the monster, a figure stepped out. Skedar casually let out a complaint. Alice glanced at the newcomer. Skedar's voice carried, telling Will he didn't need to receive these guests on his behalf. Seeing his teacher arrive safely, Will breathed a sigh of relief and beamed. Skedar adjusted his glasses, nodded in thanks for Will's efforts, and Will called out his teacher's name excitedly. A vivid blue magic circle appeared beneath Will's hand. He pressed his palm to the injured man's chest, pouring all his restorative power into him and urging him to hang on. Professor Skedar stood beside him and warned Will to be careful. The female cultist and her shadow snake revealed themselves, explaining the type of venom curse they were using. Will drew a dagger ready to fight, while Skedar guessed they craved his knowledge to create more monsters. Skedar praised Will for his rapid progress, which warmed the boy's heart. The black tabio stared intently. Skedar noted that this species did not originally belong to this kingdom. Will broke into a cold sweat, realizing the cult had gone to the trouble of bringing this dangerous creature from the eastern border. The girl didn't care. She was even surprised the two of them didn't already know about it. She pulled out a blazing red stone, saying they only used these snakes because the cult had granted them. A close-up of the glittering magical stone in her hand showed she was a cult fanatic who found happiness in obedience. She sneered with glee, eager to finish this capture mission quickly. She dashed off, leaving a trail of purple eyes lurking behind her. The tabio snakes slithered clumsily out of the darkness surrounding them. A huge shadow rose up, blotting out the moon. The cultist acted supercilious, saying that if persuasion failed they'd beat him to a pulp and drag him in. Will asked in a low voice, was it really all just her personal ambition? Anger flared. Will gripped his sword, viewing the cult as fools unworthy of living. Will decided he would capture the girl alive to question her. Skedar watched Will's back, wondering what in his past had made him so furious. The giant snake lunged forward. The cultist declared she wouldn't hesitate to send Will on his way. Will leapt forward, telling Skedar to leave the biggest one to him. He weaved through the smaller snakes, determined not to let her do as she pleased. The venom curse was truly a nightmare, nothing short of a curse clinging to the body. No sooner had he healed than the toxin gnawed at the wound again, as if the treatment had done nothing. For a healer, this was a natural enemy, but Will showed no hesitation. A swift blade sliced through and sent the advancing shadow snake's bodies flying. He smiled confidently. As long as he wasn't bitten, the toxin meant nothing. The girl gaped in shock, then shouted that there were still many more of them. Another swarm of snakes plunged down from above behind Will. Boom, columns of fire exploded in succession, blasting everything around. Professor Skedar pushed up his glasses and teasingly remarked that he still had plenty of explosive magic circles left. The cultist, irritated, bit her nails and muttered that these people were too troublesome. She summoned a massive snake, deciding to go all out. The giant monster lunged down as if to crush Will on the spot. Will braced his legs, releasing his physical limits as his feet crackled with blue electricity. He sprang up, spinning in midair to evade the giant snake's attack in a dazzling display. In the blink of an eye, dozens of swift slashes tore through the creature's skin. The wound sizzled with smoke, Will realized this one's defenses were formidable. He landed lightly and turned to face his enemy. Will stood proudly opposite the writhing giant snake. He raised his sword to block a powerful strike, sparks flying into the night. Will smiled confidently, inwardly glad he'd studied its attack patterns. He slid forward, deftly dodging the shadow snake's strike right in front of the cultist. Skedar reached out and taunted the opponent, asking if they were looking somewhere else. A blazing golden magic circle appeared, startling the cultist. A massive explosion erupted right in the empty lot where she had been standing. As the smoke cleared, Skedar remained standing with a cold, extremely cool expression. The cultist hid beneath the scales of the second giant snake, believing she was completely safe. Will and Skedar were plotting. He wanted to take this one down first, but still hadn't figured out how to break its defense. Will tapped the hilt of his blade lightly, as if he discovered the creature's weak point. Skedar narrowed his eyes at his pupil, waiting to see what he would do next. Will dashed off like an arrow, prompting Skedar to praise his speed in amazement. He leapt high into the air, aiming straight for the massive body of the shadow beast. Will flipped through the air, ready to deliver the decisive blow. He drove the dagger in, creating a powerful shock that sent sprays of blood flying. Will shouted, signaling Skedar to execute the next step of the plan. Skedar swung his hand, preparing to activate another extremely powerful magic. Will braced himself as golden electricity enveloped the pommel of his sword. A vertical mighty slash ripped through the giant snake's body, blood and fire erupting everywhere. The beast's enormous body collapsed, and the cultist stood dazed in the distance from shock. She couldn't believe her eyes, her face drained pale in horror at Will's power. Will wiped his mouth, heat rose in waves from his body after exerting all his strength. He took a ready stance, eyes razor-sharp toward the enemy, and shouted for the next one to show themselves. Will assumed his stance and boldly called the next challenger out to fight. Behind them, Skedar and the mysterious girl were still stuck in the tense battlefield. The old professor realized Will had risked taking the full blast of the recent explosion, instead of letting it spread. Skedar worriedly thought that however talented Will was, at this rate he'd soon be in danger. The green-haired female cultist stood at a distance, sneering and asking if the other woman was at a disadvantage. Will stared at his opponent and asked if she was ready to give up. But no, she changed her mind, the smile on her lips growing even more grotesque. She began to question Skedar about his research in the area. She mentioned the nearby settlement where people of interest lived, making both Will and Skedar go pale. She cackled at their predictable reactions, then unleashed a swarm of Tabio shadow snakes writhing across the ground. She taunted that with their faces like that, she had no choice but to act. Will broke into a cold sweat as he saw the huge number of black snakes charging toward him. Skedar immediately cast a magic formation, declaring he would let none through. Loud explosions rang out in succession, wiping out the swarm of shadow snakes. The female cultist pointed provocatively, asking if he could withstand such overwhelming numbers. Skedar remained resolute, insisting he could handle however many there were. While swinging his blade to cleave the snakes, Will reminded himself not to take even one hit because the venom curse was deadly. The boy was determined not to let any through the protective ring. The cultist laughed, then suddenly signaled a retreat to preserve her life. Will immediately rushed forward, determined not to let her escape since she was the only lead to the mysterious cult. Skedar abruptly realized something was wrong, horror showing in his eyes. The old professor shouted Will's name to warn him. The female cultist smiled slyly, pleased that Will had fallen into her trap. A giant shadow snake suddenly appeared right behind Will. Will panickingly realized he had been too careless and had no time to raise his defense. A close-up showed the horrified gaze of a character witnessing the precarious scene. A terrible explosion occurred right at Will's position. The blast threw the boy, sending him skidding along the ground. Will forced himself up and thanked Skedar for his timely support. But when he looked back, he froze at the sight before him. Skedar was being clamped by a shadow snake on his arm, black miasma seething from it. The female cultist smiled in satisfaction as her true target had been struck. The Tabio's fangs were sunk deep into Skedar's shoulder, leaving chilling black marks. Will was speechless, only able to stare at the old professor in shock. Skedar collapsed, clutching his chest in pain as the toxin began to take effect. Behind him, the shadow of death seemed to loom. The cultist coldly ordered Will to stop immediately. She threatened that if Will didn't obediently stand still, she'd finish off the old professor on the spot. The female cultist walked away nonchalantly, leaving the ruined battlefield behind. Watching her back, Will could only grit his teeth and endure in helplessness. He blamed himself for being too careless, causing Skedar to be exposed while trying to protect him. Skedar weakly called Will's name while the boy stood motionless from the shock. The tired professor warned Will not to take on too much, since he still had many things to teach him. The female cultist sneered, mocking that Skedar was on his last legs yet still had the energy to talk. Despite the pain under the enemy's grip, Skedar still urged Will not to worry about him and to hurry and stop her. She made a cunning offer. If Will obeyed, she would spare the old professor's life. But Skedar held firm in his belief, insisting that even if he had to die, Will would surely defeat her. "Is that so? Then I'll just kill you," the female cultist replied coldly, her eyes lethal. She channeled magic, preparing to deliver the finishing blow. Suddenly, a brilliant blue light streaked across, blocking her attack. Will was astonished to see the little dragon Rare, from who knew where, dart out to help. Rare looked full of vigor, unafraid of the cultist's dark power. Will realized Rare truly wanted to fight alongside him this time. He knew he couldn't hesitate any longer. Defeating her was the only way to save Skedar now. Will analyzed carefully. She couldn't accelerate the venom's effect to kill Skedar instantly. This was his one chance. The female cultist laughed challengingly, asking what would happen if Will couldn't win. Will tightened his grip on his sword, determined not to let hesitation hold him back another moment. She summoned a giant shadow snake that lunged straight at Will as if to swallow him. Will focused intensely. He understood that defeating this monster without Skedar's support would be a tremendous challenge. Rare let out a brave cry as if to declare its readiness. Rare's eyes shone brilliantly. It was preparing to unleash a tremendous energy. Will smiled with trust, deciding to bet everything on his little dragon. Will watched Rare, wondering what trick the little dragon had in mind. Looking into its eyes, Will sensed that Rare wanted to lend him a hand. He decided to go all in, wagering everything on its idea. Will recalled the principles of the growth-boosting magic he had used on the wooden figures. But a living creature's body was far more complex than plants. A single mistake could kill the target instantly. He placed his hand on Rare, hoping it could regulate the life energy he was about to transfer. A magic circle appeared above Rare's head as Will entrusted all his faith to his dragon. Rare's eyes glowed bright green, ready to receive the massive mana flow. Its claws began to lengthen, emitting a powerful green light. Its wings spread wide as Rare's whole body trembled under the transformation. A close-up revealed the overwhelming eyes of the draconic beast. Rare roared loudly and transformed into a giant dragon, looming behind Will. The mana expenditure was so great that Will could barely breathe, his hands trembling. The energy was so tremendous it could make a normal creature explode instantly. Seeing Rare so enormous, it was clear it contained an extremely massive amount of life force. The hag of occultist still sneered, clutching the red stone as if to provoke. But then she suddenly froze when she saw Rare glare at her. The smile vanished from her lips, her face turning pale from the overwhelming pressure. Will added, "Don't even dream that your Rare will lose control." Rare lifted its head and roared, ready to finish the fight. A cerulean energy orb gathered at its maw, spinning with fierce power. A breath of magical force shot through the formation, sweeping away everything in its path. Shadows coiled tightly around the hag, leaving her only able to moan helplessly. Her face showed clear terror at the unexpected end. A cataclysmic explosion occurred, smoke and flames billowing skyward. The shock was so strong that even the distant house trembled. Thick dust and smoke enveloped the scene, forcing everyone to shield their faces. The cultist lay flattened on the ground, utterly powerless to resist. Rare maintained a majestic stance, standing guard over Will amid the rubble. Then it began to glow and slowly shrink. Will watched the magical lights as they faded away. Rare had returned to its tiny form, rubbing its eyes and looking exhausted. Will smiled faintly, thinking to himself that dragons truly hid many secrets. But the joy was short-lived. He suddenly remembered something more important. Will rushed over to the scholar Skedar, who lay motionless on the ground. He knelt, his hand beginning to tremble with worry for the man's life. Memories of someone he once failed to save surged back. Will poured all his strength into casting a restorative spell, hoping this time would be different. Sweat streamed down his face as he silently prayed his stamina would hold out. Rare leapt onto Will's shoulder, growling as if urging him not to give up. Meanwhile, the cultist shivered, her whole body trembling violently. She was shocked to realize her shadow snakes had all been wiped out. Will anxiously watched Skedar's condition, the enemy's silhouette retreating in the background. He realized the female cultist intended to flee, but rescuing the man was the top priority now. A magic circle appeared on Skedar's chest as Will focused all his mind on stabilizing the wound. Skedar weakly told Will to choose what he truly wanted and not to burden himself over him. Will's face was speckled with sweat, the inner struggle evident in every breath. He told himself he couldn't greedily choose both sides at this moment. Will's gaze hardened as he firmly declared he chose to save the scholar Skedar. Because if he stopped treating him now, the scholar would surely not survive. Choosing one thing meant giving up another, and that courage would become strength for him later. Will silently vowed to prove to Skedar that the scholar had been completely right to trust him. In the distance, the female cultist trembled, sweat pouring from her as a strange pain hit her. She was stunned by a peculiar magic that could place and detonate magic circles from afar. A magic circle flared to life right there, directly striking the target with far greater force. A shockwave explosion erupted instantly, flinging everything around her into the air. The female cultist screamed miserably amid the thick smoke and dust of the blast. She collapsed to the ground, utterly spent with no strength left to resist. Sobs rang out as she moaned, unable to endure this heart-wrenching pain any longer. Her eyes blurred with tears as she reached out, as if begging belatedly for mercy. But that magic could be triggered countless times, repeatedly pushing an opponent into a corner. Consecutive explosions occurred, tossing up an entire war-torn area. Will stood stunned, looking at Skedar, who had just declared the enemy would never escape this place. He asked Skedar in astonishment how the man could be so strong even while afflicted by the venom curse. Skedar suddenly coughed up blood, prompting Will to cry out his name in extreme fear. The scholar murmured that this was both the choice and the responsibility he had to bear. Will shouted loudly, firmly asserting that Skedar would not be defeated by such a petty poison. He concentrated all his mana into his hands, determined to find a sliver of hope to save the man. "Now it's my turn," Will roared, radiating a powerful green spiritual energy. A massive formation enveloped them both, as Will poured his strength into proving Skedar's choice right. Will knew he couldn't neutralize the toxin immediately, but he could treat the damage it caused. He watched Skedar struggle and silently vowed that the scholars Will would never break. Then Will turned to the little spirit beast, affirming that Rare was the key to the plan. Rare looked at him resolutely, as if it understood what it needed to do. "It's my turn now," Will funneled power into his hands, determined to prove Skedar's choice to save him was right. A brilliant green light erupted, forming a grand matrix that engulfed the ruined area. The magic dissipated, and above the mountain range a beautiful rainbow appeared in the sky. A pair of tired but peaceful eyes gradually opened amid the quiet space. Skedar awoke on a small bed, seeing Rare curled up asleep beside him. He was astonished to realize he was still alive. Everything felt like an unreal dream. Will pushed the door open with a radiant smile, asking if he still felt any pain. Skedar hesitated to reply, the sensations in his body hard to describe. Will explained that he had numbed all sensation so the scholar wouldn't have to suffer from the toxin. Each time the toxin destroyed the body, the restorative magic immediately regenerated it, repeating endlessly. The scholar fell silent, contemplating that his life was being sustained continuously. "Nothing gets past you," Will laughed, then confirmed that Rare served as the vessel supporting him. The spirit beast had been filled with life energy and was now gradually releasing it into the man. Will told him he would have to stay put until an antidote was found, causing Skedar to admire his talent. Skedar smiled contentedly, saying he had been prepared to depart long ago. Will wondered why the man was willing to teach him everything despite having just met. Skedar gazed into the distance, saying that upon reaching the pinnacle of research, one encounters countless inexplicable things. He had once feared his life would end before he could fully understand the vast world of monsters. His eyes suddenly brightened as he looked at the passionate young man before him. Seeing Will pour his heart into the work had given him a great surge of courage. Skedar wanted the path he had walked to become a signpost for geniuses like him. He smiled kindly, wondering if he was being a bit meddlesome in wanting to tutor the boy. "Meddlesome," Will replied with a laugh. He truly wanted to learn much more from him. Skedar felt relieved, but it seemed the long conversation had begun to exhaust him. He closed his eyes and promised to continue teaching as soon as he woke again. Will softly wished him a good sleep, then quietly watched the scholar drift into slumber. He told himself he couldn't let the man overexert anymore, at least in his current condition. Will stepped out of the room. The locals in the nearby settlement would take care of him now. He decided to return to the Schwartz Academy to tie up the remaining matters. Accompanying him was the mysterious girl still lost in a deep coma. The Schwartz Academy appeared tranquil under the brilliant morning sunlight. Erica paused mid-walk when she spotted a familiar figure approaching. Before she could rejoice at his return, she was stunned to see Will carrying someone else. It was a beautiful, unfamiliar girl with mint-silver hair, sleeping soundly in his arms. Erica froze, her face clouding over with a mix of jealousy and surprise. Will paid no mind to that attitude. He intended to ask Erica for a rather important favor. Smiling brightly, Will suddenly asked, "Do you want to come with me to Hylic?" Erica could only stammer, utterly shocked by the unexpected proposal. Taking advantage of the break after extracurriculars, Will and Erica went to the Hylic Academy, specializing in restorative magic training. Standing before the old school, Will felt deeply nostalgic despite not having officially graduated from there in this life. Erica was still flustered. She confirmed their goal was to find an instructor here to wake the mysterious girl. Will admitted as much, saying explaining everything too soon would only make her more anxious. He smiled apologetically and insisted he truly needed Erica's help right now. Erica steadied herself, vowing not to get overly excited just because someone needed her, though her heart fluttered. She declared that however much Will tried to win her over, she would not be easily swayed. "We're here, excuse the intrusion," Will announced as he stepped inside. Erica hurried after him, calling to her friend who strode forward decisively. But then she suddenly flinched, stopping before a presence heavy with pressure ahead. Inside the grand hall, a strange woman stood waiting, exuding a complex aura. She leisurely puffed on a cigarette, her sharp gaze sweeping over the newcomers. It was Lily Whitebell, a Hylic Academy instructor with a very distinctive, edgy presence. She gave a faint smile at Will's polite greeting, declaring she already knew his identity well. Will froze at being recognized instantly, cigarette smoke swirling around his surprised face. With a knowing smile, Lily called out Will's name directly, the prodigy who should have become the greatest healer this school had ever produced.